Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Vanguard Wall. This is, we've been working on this, I think, for 6-8 months. I can't remember how long it's been. My best friend, Jason, who is also your super close friend, linked us up. Oh, man, it's been months.
The wheels have been turning for a few months.
Yeah.
But we've been in really good comms the whole time.
Yeah. And I've heard about you for years, dude. So it's just funny. And it's funny how our circles with some of the people you served with and guys that you know and
the soft community is a small one. And also I'm the godfather of Jason's son. So kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Jason, appreciate the hookup. So before we dive into your story, man, I have a little intro. I do one for everybody. And so here's yours. I have a conversation that I honestly don't even know how to introduce properly. The man sitting across from me is my friend Chris McCoy, and his story is unlike anything I've ever heard, and I've heard a lot of stories. Chris is a former Army Ranger who served in the 75th Ranger Regiment, 275 to be exact. He was friends with Pat Tillman, the real Pat Tillman, not the myth, and he's going to share stories about Pat that you've never heard before. But Chris's story goes way beyond his military service. This is a guy who went from being kicked out of his house at 13 years old to becoming an elite Army Ranger, who lost everything after getting kicked out of the regiment and ended up addicted to drugs and living on the streets of Seattle and made multiple suicide attempts. Chris somehow clawed his way back and ended up working on the Deadliest Catch in the Bering Sea, doing what he calls literally the most physically demanding job in the world. And that's just part of it. He became one of the most respected graffiti artists in the country. He's now been sober for over a decade and works as a special operations liaison with a security clearance. But here's what really got to me about Chris. His story isn't just about overcoming adversity. It's about the people who showed up at exactly the right moments when he had nothing left. Guardian angels, if you believe in that sort of thing. A Vietnam veteran judge, a Seattle cop who looked like Superman, Alaskan fisherman who saw something in a broken man that he couldn't even see in himself. Now, I need to give you a heads up. We're going to cover some heavy topics today: childhood abuse, combat, addiction, suicide attempts. Chris doesn't sugarcoat anything, and neither will I. But we're talking about it because his story needs to be heard, because somewhere out there, someone needs to know that no matter how dark it gets, there's a way back. Chris McCoy is living proof that redemption is possible, that second chances and third chances and fourth chances can change everything. So buckle up. This is going to be a long conversation. We're going to take our time, and by the end of it, I think you're going to see the world a little differently. Chris, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is a story that we took a long time preparing, dude, because I think your story is unique.
You're a very thorough host too, which makes me feel good about this.
So we're gonna start just with a couple opening salvos before we dive deep into your bio. The first one is, Chris, you've been an Army Ranger, worked on the Deadliest Catch, which that's going to be fun to talk about. For those of you that haven't watched that TV series, my family was addicted for a little while. You survived multiple suicide attempts and were friends with Pat Tillman. If someone told you at 13 when you got kicked out of your house that you become a SOCOM liaison with a security clearance, what would you have said?
I certainly wouldn't have believed him. So, I mean, it would have been definitely disbelief. I'm from a background. I'm from a peer group. I'm from an area in which people just, especially I'm from a familial group where people just don't succeed. You know, most of the people that I grew up around are very, this is going to sound terribly disparaging, but it's just the unvarnished truth. Most of the people that I grew up around are really low energy, low output, not uneducated, but willfully ignorant people whose their perfection horizon is just above the poverty line. So for me, I thought the zenith that I could hope for would be one day to work, as a contractor and have my own pickup truck. That was kind of like what I thought, man, if I really make it, maybe one day I can make 35 grand a year. That'd be amazing. Right. Cause that was kind of like the perfection horizon of the people around me. Especially the men. The older generation of men in my family were some of the bedrock foundational, greatest generation people of this country. But the immediate generation of men above me, that would have been my father and uncle's ages, none of those dudes had any shot to succeed.
What is a moment that you think saved your life?
I mean, there's been many. There's been many. I think the most important thing that ever happened was when I got thrown out of my house. The woman that I call my grandmother, she's not technically my grandmother, but the woman I call my grandmother, Dorothy. When that old lady took me in, when she took me in the summer, I was 13, turning 14. When she took me in, she was a widowed, older lady.
Don't tell the whole story yet, 'cause we're gonna go there.
But when Dorothy Updike took me in as a teenager, that's when everything changed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You said you think Rangers are born, not made.
Very much so.
Were you born broken or born to be a warrior?
I think both. You know, hearing the term "born to be a warrior," it sounds so cliche. It sounds like something that's like printed on a coffee mug.
Yeah.
But I do think that there are human phenotypes, and warrior is just like one of them. I don't even like the term warrior. I like the term fighter. But there's people who are just, I think, are born in phenotypes, right? Healers, educators, merchants, builders. I think fighters is one of those human phenotypes where you're just born with a programming to go down a certain lane. I think academics is one of them, creatives. There's just, I don't know how many there are, but there's probably a fairly finite number of like human phenotypes. And most people are born into one of those phenotypes, and a lucky few of them figure out what that phenotype is at an early age. Mine happened to be somebody who's kind of a fighter, I think.
This episode is brought to you by TitansArms.com, your trusted source for research-grade SARMs. These third-party tested compounds are formulated to support research into tissue selective activity, especially in muscle and bone. Titan offers free nationwide shipping, a wide selection in both capsules and droppers, and oversized 90 capsule and 90 ml bottles. Everything is compounded in the USA, raising the bar for quality and reliability. From the lab to your door, Titan delivers transparent data and premium service. That's TitansArms.com, forged by research, not opinions. It's awesome. Looking at your life from abject poverty to Army Ranger to being addicted to drugs, to Deadliest Catch, to SOCOM liaison, do you believe in destiny or just pure willpower?
100% willpower.
Amen.
I don't think there's any destiny involved in it at all.
I think you got to say, man.
Yeah, I think everything. I know everything that I've done has been the result of pure will. You know, and that will is a very ancient concept, but yeah, there's no destiny involved in it.
One last one as we get warmed up.
Sure.
If you had to choose one word to describe your life story, what would it be?
Resilience.
Yes, man. That's
Resilience.
awesome. No hesitation.
Yeah.
I love it, bro. Well, I tell linear stories, man. We tell the biography of the person. I think we're not defined by the thing that we did one time or two times or this job or that job or exactly. So I'm looking forward to telling your entire story. I have a whole list of questions, but I think I'm just going to throw the softball. So take us back to your earliest remembrance of childhood, like the earliest point that you can remember, and let's use that as our starting point.
It's bad. It's not good.
Yeah.
The first memory I have is of being hit. I grew up in an extremely, extremely physically abusive household. Father was big, huge dude. Not just a dude that beat his kids, but like an alcoholic, a grifter, a hustler, always in and out of jail, always moving, a con man. And yeah, my very first human memory is of being struck. So that kind of was that kind of was the jump off point. Fear, so.
What's the earliest genesis you can remember of your mom and dad? Like, how did they meet? I know that's a very unique part of your story.
So yeah, my story is really interesting. I have very, very few memories of my biological mother. I know that I look full Asian, but I'm half white and I'm half Asian. My father's big, huge white dude. He joined the military, went to Korea, knocked a woman up in Korea, brought her back here, and they had me here. So I was born in America. Then the biological mother, the Korean woman, she skipped out when I was, I think, a year and a half. I'm not really sure the lore, but I think like before I was 2 for sure. She skipped out because she had family somewhere in America. So he was a single dad then. And then, like I said, alcoholic, con man, grifter, hustler, always in and out of trouble with the law. I've got several brothers, right? So my father's name was Glenn, who went by Dickie. My brother, his brother, my uncle, Buford, died in a construction accident. Jesse died in a shootout with the police.
Your uncle?
Yeah. And then Uncle Tiger absconded from the family when he was 19 and was literally never heard of again. So, real wild man, right? My last name's McCoy, and I'm actually 100% not a distant relative of, but I'm in the middle of the real Hatfield and McCoy family tree. And that's not something I'm like proud of. It's just like, it's a little bit of a link to like Americana. But if you knew the McCoy family, that wouldn't be something to be like flag wavingly proud of. I just happen to be part of this family that's linked to like Appalachia and Americana lore.
So your mom leaves, well, you're like, let's say you're with your dad. Does he remarry? Like,
he remarries a woman that from this point forward, we're going to colloquially call my mother, right? He remarries a woman. I guess legally she would be my stepmother, but we'll just call her my mother. He remarries a woman who's my mother, and then they've got a chaotic, horrific, terrible relationship. And when I was 4, he comes home from work one night, heavily intoxicated like he is every single night, and a snowstorm is rolling in. This is in West Virginia, obviously, Hatfields and McCoy's, West Virginia. Snowstorm is coming in, and he blacks out drunk, so she takes a couple suitcases, and she absconds with me and leaves the home. So in essence, I guess she kidnapped me, right? So she absconds from there. She drives all the way back to Maryland, and by the time he wakes up, he's severely snowed in. So a couple days goes by. He, I guess the pass is clear or whatever like that, and he drives back from West Virginia to my mother's parents' house in Maryland, and he attempts to kidnap me back. And then there's an armed standoff between my uncle and him on the porch. And, my uncle pulls a gun on him. My father's like, I'll be back. I swear to God, I'm going to get that kid. Like, it's something out of a terrible Lifetime movie. And then he leaves. So the father leaves, and never heard from him again until I was like 28.
Really?
So he disappears forever. And he goes back into like what he does, which is a life of crime, never having a job, always hustling, always plotting, scheming, coming up with some scheme, like, he's a schemer and a grifter and an abuser and an alcoholic. And that's like all he's ever going to be. I think he's dead now, but I'm not sure.
So your mom, the person that we refer to as your mom, she remarries. And how old are you? Do you remember that? Or
she remarried when I was 9. So there was a little blip in time where my mother was living with my grandmother and grandfather. And from the age of 4 to 9, things were real nice, right? Well, I wouldn't say they were real nice. We were poor, but like it wasn't the chaos that ensued afterwards. My mother is severely, severely mentally ill. My mother possesses a litany of diagnosed mental disorders, and all of them are really, really toxic for the raising of children. She's got severe bipolar, and she's also borderline personality disorder. And I would venture to say that she's the most narcissistic, sociopathic human being I've ever met. She's got a lot of other children, and she is persona non grata for all of her family, all of her immediate family, all of her children. I don't think she has any friends. I'm not in contact with her. And my one sister's in contact with her. And she doesn't have any, she doesn't have a peer group. She's a person who's impossible to be friends with because there's just not really anything going on there except she's a very, very sick, malevolent, unhappy person.
So she remarries your 9.
Right.
What was that like? Like your stepdad, that's a whole
thing too. So she remarries. My mother is a very, very big person. She's like, I want to say damn near 6 foot tall, 200 pounds, just big, broad, large person. And so she remarries a very, very tiny little guy, little 5'6", 5'5", Napoleon complex guy, who has a severe Napoleon bully complex, and he fancies himself a traveling revival what is it?
Preacher?
A preacher.
Evangelist?
Evangelist. Sorry. Thank you. Fire and brimstone, preaching out of the Bible every night. But the thing is, he's somebody with, and he just passed away recently, but he is somebody with extremely limited cognitive function. No education whatsoever. And I'm not saying that you need education to be smart. Some of the smartest people I know don't have college degrees, but this is a person who's very, very uneducated, very willfully ignorant, has difficulty reading. And he was a bug man. He was a bug sprayer guy for 40 years, his entire life. Carried a can, sprayed for bugs. A good example of this guy's perfection ability is that he was a bug man with the same company for 40 years. And in that 40 years, he was never promoted ever. He was never promoted to be in charge of like 2 other bug guys on the team. And when his son joined the company as a bug man when he was 18, by the time his son was 21, his son had already been promoted. So this is a person who, you get a severely mentally ill woman, marries a guy who's just a limited cognitive ability, and they're both pretty malevolent. And it started off a chain of events. They ended up having 8 more children. And then at one point there was 11 of us living in a 2-bedroom house with like tar paper on the walls and like dirt basement, unfinished basement with like dirt on the bottom of it. That's where I lived. And it just became an extremely chaotic, abusive, physically abusive, mentally abusive, and then abuse in the form of denial of like basic sustenance, things like that. So just absolute nuclear fireball in the house.
I remember you telling me like you guys didn't even have stuff to eat half the time. Like,
yeah.
How often did you eat? What'd you guys eat? Like,
it's kind of funny. I really wish that 2 of my brothers were here because I actually have a very close bond with some of my brothers. And my shout outs to Thaddeus and Zachary if you end up watching this. And that bean soup and the cereal dinner. My brothers and I kind of laugh about this now. And shout out to Joe. But I can remember going like weeks and weeks and weeks eating like Cheerios for dinner, or like my mother would buy these like huge bags of like she would buy huge bags of like lentils and peas and lima beans and just boil them in a pot with like some salt, and that would just basically like be the porridge that we ate. I never had a lunch that I took with me to school ever. I was on like lunch tickets. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they had this down here, but yeah, I was on lunch tickets and free breakfast at school and stuff like that. And so yeah, like the concept of like birthday parties, vacations, all the shit that normal people like think is like I didn't even know what that was. You know what I mean? There was just church and then the house, and like I can remember the house just being so loud. The house was so loud all the time. Everyone was screaming. All the kids were vying for attention. My mother's an extremely loud person. My stepfather was a super loud person. It just felt like I was in like a crowded bar all day long, every day. And I think that caused a lot of damage. I think that caused a lot of damage to like my CNS, because I know that my brothers and sisters are certainly dealing with that now in their later life.
The emotional and verbal abuse was at extreme levels. What does that sound like to a child, man?
It's what it sounds like. It just sounds like, man, I can just remember it sounding like a huge wall of like noise, like a huge wall of like static and noise. Like if you took a television with a static screen and turned it up until it was like ear splitting and then sat like right in front of it, that to me is what it felt like. Just constant yelling and screaming all the time in the house.
You grew up in West Virginia, man. And I know like you and I talked about like you were heavily bullied for being half Asian in a place with no diversity.
Well, I was born in West Virginia and then I came to Maryland. So I grew up in Maryland in the Baltimore area, in Baltimore and in the Baltimore area.
But I remember like you were telling me like there was like you got picked on a lot for the whole.
Yeah,
age.
I mean, I never had an Asian friend my entire life. No one looked like me. I'm a fairly bigger than average person now. You know, I'm like 6'2", well over 200, and like, but growing up, I was an unusually late bloomer. So when I was like 16, 17, I still looked like I was like 14. And, you know, when I was 14, 13, I looked like a little kid. And then kind of coming from this super oppressive household and like not having anything, being poor, wearing raggedy shit, wearing tore up raggedy shit. I wore tore up raggedy shit my whole life, which I think now is why like, I wouldn't say I'm materialistic, but I'm always like dressed properly right now. Like I'm always in some kind of a fit now because like I grew up not even having the concept of like what nice clothes were. So yeah, there was a ton of bullying. And then I can remember going up to the playground. I can remember my grandmother bought me like a starter jacket one year. You remember starter jackets? Oh, yeah. For those of you who are out here who are listening who don't know what a starter jacket is, back in the 90s, there was a huge fashion trend by this company called Starter that made really nice, like cool, like college like jackets.
Yeah, they had college, NFL.
Yeah,
like, yeah,
they were half zip jackets,
and it was a flex.
That was a flex to have a starter jacket. Yeah. They were probably only $50, but that was a big deal. And my grandmother got me a Notre Dame starter jacket when I was in like middle school. This was like huge. This was crazy, right? This might have well been a Rolex, right? My grandmother got me a starter jacket. And I remember going to the playground that was behind my house, and I got jumped, I got beat up, and these kids took my starter jacket. And I come running back to the house, and I was crying. I told my mom about it, and my mom beat my ass because she told me that I must have done something to make them want to take it from me. Like I must have done something to deserve that. She beat my ass for losing the jacket. And then she told me that I deserved to get it taken because I must have done something to make those kids want to take it from me. Like that's the kind of house I grew up in.
At what age did you realize that like your family wasn't normal?
You know, that's a good question because when you're a kid, you just don't know. You just don't know what you don't know. And it's funny because when my grandmother took me in after I got kicked out of the house, because I got kicked out of the house with no plan. There was no plan whatsoever where I was going to live. I just got thrown out of the house. And I can remember my mom and my stepfather sitting me down and telling me like, hey, you're not going to live here anymore. We're not really sure where you're going to live, but you're not going to live here anymore. And somebody will take you. I can literally remember them saying, somebody will take you.
What was the catalyst?
What was the what?
What was the catalyst for them to kick you out?
Well, it was him. Well, she is a sociopath who has no concept of like, and I'm being very honest with this. This isn't like some TikTok, psychology. Like she's a sociopath who has no concept of like empathy, zero. And he, I didn't look like his kids. You know, he had 8 kids, white guy. I didn't look like the kids. And there was a significant age gap. I was almost 9 years older than the other kid. So they made a very callous decision. Like, hey, it's going to be a lot cheaper for us if we don't have a 13-year-old boy in the house. Because you have a son. How old is Jackson?
He'll be 13.
How much does that fool eat?
A lot.
He eats, right? He eats. And he has different needs than like a little kid, right? So they just made a very callous, like dollars and cents decision. Like, hey, we're already way below the poverty line. It'll probably save us X amount of dollars if we get rid of this, human being that's consuming resources in the home. And and then they told me they were going to do it. And they had zero plan as to where I was going to go.
Did you cry, beg? Like, did you fight back? Like, do you remember?
As f***ed up as it sounds, there was a part of me that was excited that I was going to get the fuck up out of there. Like, to be honest with you, because like they talked about group home, they talked about foster home, they talked about my uncle, and my uncle was like, no, I'm not taking this kid in. My uncle's not a bad dude, but he's not a good dude, right?
Yeah.
They talked to a couple of my stepfather's brothers, and they were like, I don't even know this kid. You know what I mean? I'm not going to just have a 13-year-old foisted on me. A 13-year-old that doesn't look like me, who I don't know, who's born from some dude who may or may not be alive. I don't even know this kid. So even the thought of like ending up in a group home, to me kind of sounded like, well, it's got to be better than this. This sucks. Like at that time, like I was living in an unfinished basement with a dirt floor and like on like a GI cot. Like this is a true story. Like I didn't sleep in a bed with a mattress and a box spring. I didn't sleep in a bed with a mattress and a box spring like a normal bed that people sleep in. I didn't sleep in one of those beds until I was like, I want to say 21. When I moved out of the house, I was living with my girlfriend for a little while, and like she had a tiny apartment and a real bed. And I remember laying on that bed and being like, oh my God, this is like what a real bed feels like. I couldn't believe it. You know what I mean?
Your grandmother took you in. You said it felt like winning the lottery. Describe walking into her house for the first time as your new home.
Well, I was already familiar with her house for visiting because she lived close by and we would visit. And every time we visited, it was really awkward. Like my mother is a control freak. Everything has to be her way. Don't talk unless she tells you to talk. Don't look, don't move, don't speak. Hyper levels of control. So I can remember going to grandmom's house and like sitting there and feeling kind of uncomfortable because like, you're a little kid, you're in an old lady's house, you're sitting in the living room, your eyes forward, don't move, don't talk, don't consume, don't do anything. But she lived in a house with a nice yard, and I had some cousins that lived behind the house. And then I had the Pagans Motorcycle Club. Any of you guys out there who are familiar with who the Pagans Motorcycle Club is? They're one of the very big, I think it's the big 4 outlaw motorcycle clubs in America. You got the Hells Angels, the Mongols, the Pagans, and then the Outlaws, I think they are. Well, the Pagans are like a huge motorcycle club that's in the northeast region of America where I'm from. And one of my grandmother's neighbors was a Pagan chapter leader, Victor Castoratus, rest in peace. So my grandmother's house had a nice yard, 2 cousins that lived next door. I had a cousin that lived up the street, and a Pagans Motorcycle Club chapter house next door. And when I just remember going to my grandmother's house one day and her sitting me down, and my grandmother's very affectionate, which is also like my grandmother's very affectionate, which is like very foreign to me. I remember her sitting down and she put her hands on my shoulders and she was like very, very sincere. And it was weird for me to hear someone talk sincerely. You know what I mean? Because everything that my mother says sounds patronizing or robotic or fake or weird. And she just said, hey, you're going to live here now with me. And I hope that's okay with you. And like, things are going to be a lot different. And I just want you to know, you don't have to feel weird here, And it was a hot summer day. And I can just clearly remember this wave of like joy coming over me. Like I felt like I won the fucking lottery. Like, oh my God, it's really happening. Like I'm going to live here now. And like, it wasn't so much that I was close to my grandmother. Eventually we became extremely close, right? Like rest in peace, Dorothy Updike. But like, at the time I literally felt probably what it would feel like right now is if you scratched off a lottery ticket and saw like $2 million on there, you would just have this wave of like, oh my God. And then in a day, everything changed. And then I can remember the next memory I have of that really clearly is, Mom, Betsy, coming up to visit, and then her and my grandmother having a screaming match in the other room. Like a really bad, like my grandmother's a sweet, nice lady, or was a sweet, nice lady. And I'm talking real, like some real ugly hood shit, screaming at each other in the other room. And then Mom leaving, and then grandma coming in and sitting down. She's like, I don't think you're going to see your mom for a while. And I'm like, cool, sick.
What do you think was said in that conversation?
At the time, I didn't even really think about it. But now looking back on it, realizing that it was a pivotal moment, I think my grandmother was a pretty headstrong woman, right? My grandmother was a blue collar, Baltimore, blue hair, smoking cigarettes in the kitchen. Like she was an awesome lady, right? And everyone knew her daughter was a maniac. And I think what she did was like, she did what anyone would say. Like, what the is wrong with you? What are you doing? You can't just kick your kid out. You can't just take your kid and give him to somebody. You lunatic. I'm going to take this kid in, but like, like, this is terrible what you're doing. And my mother was very, very, very condescending. My mother's a shit talker. My mother's very condescending, very patronizing. I've never had like a real human conversation with my mother. Well, I've had one, but she's an impenetrably narcissistic sociopath. And I think my grandmother just really let her have it. Like, hey, what you're doing is wrong. And knowing my mother, I guarantee you my mother did one of these moves, like pish posture. And like, you don't do that to Dorothy Updike. Dorothy Updike got in her shit. I think Dorothy Updike stood up to her and scared her, because my mom didn't come around for a long time after that, like a long time, which was great with me. So,
hey everyone, we are excited to announce our new partnership with an awesome sponsor. When it's time to fuel my training, Alpha Country Training and Nutrition is my go-to. Founded by former Green Beret Spencer Lewis, Alpha Country crafts elite supplements to power warriors and athletes through the toughest challenges. They've got clean, effective supplements for endurance, strength, and recovery, plus apparel that actually performs. Whether you're grinding out early mornings or long miles, Alpha Country helps fuel that mission. One of their flagship products, Stay Ready Endurance, is a game changer, packed with cluster dextrin and mod carb, a premium, fast-acting, and slow-releasing carbohydrate source that keeps you fueled throughout your duration of your training. It's packed with blueberry and goji berry powders for natural antitoxin protection, has a full multivitamin blend inside, and also has electrolyte support through Himalayan pink salt and potassium. Clean, easy to digest, no bloating or heavy sugar crash that keeps you hydrated and energized during grueling workouts. Whether you're rucking in the heat, crushing high-intensity workouts, or training for Special Forces selection, this intro workout formula prevents fatigue and keeps you in the fight. Every ingredient is hand-selected for maximum performance because Spencer learned in the field, generic supplements just don't cut it. Alpha Country's entire line is built on transparency and quality, helping you recover faster and train harder. Ready to lead by example? Go to thealphacountry.com and use Vanguard20 for 20% off your first order. That's thealphacountry.com, code Vanguard20 for 20% off your first order. Power up and stay fueled with Alpha Country. Your body, your community, and your country deserve it. How'd your grandma, like, what was her discipline style? How did she guide you? What was her like?
I love my grandmother. I really do. I never, ever had discipline problems with her. The discipline problems that I had were the same problems that kids have. I was a rebellious kid. I never mouthed up to that woman ever in my life. Never once, never, ever. Like, I'd die rather than disrespect Dorothy Updike to her face. You know, I was staying out late when I got older. I was around with like getting high and drugs and things like that, and being a bad kid on the street. But like in the home, never ever disrespected her ever. Treated her with the utmost respect. And like, man, like, if you're from the hood, like, shout outs to everybody who's been raised by their grandmother. Shout outs to all grandmas everywhere, and especially shout outs to like every Baltimore dude who was raised by their grandmother. If you're from the big city and you're out there listening, if you're like Chicago, LA, New York, Louisiana, you know, like New Orleans, something like that, you know, like, shout outs to grandmothers who raise kids from their daughters. That's a real common thing, I think, I think that's a real common thing in big cities, especially like the lower tier, like economically depressed, rough areas.
Yeah.
And I'm just one of them kids. And like, it's kind of funny, as I got older, a lot of my peer group were also dudes that were raised by their grandmothers. So shout outs to working class grandmothers everywhere.
How did your grandmother react to like your graffiti phase and your drug dealing?
Well, I have a funny story about the drug dealing thing. When I was like, maybe I was sometime in high school. I don't remember when it was, because I didn't really start around until like later, when I was more like a senior. But I remember the first time I got a quarter pound of weed. I had a quarter pound of weed, which back then I was like, oh,
That's a lot. That was a lot back then.
Yeah, that's all right. I got a quarter pound of weed. My grandmother found my quarter pound of weed, and she was like, what is this? And I was like, of course, I'm holding it for a friend. It's nothing, yada, yada, yada. She's like, I want you to go and pour that in the toilet and flush it down the toilet right in front of me. So I'm like, breaking up the weed, throwing it away, trying to think how I'm going to get this money back. And she was like, how much did that cost you? And I can remember being like, it was like $20. And she goes, you spent $20 on that? You know, like, and me being like, I'm like, you know, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's a couple grand.
How bad this is going to f my profile up for a while, right? But the graffiti thing was crazy because, like, you know, I saw graffiti. I was obviously exposed to graffiti at a young age. There was graffiti all over the place. And, like, for those of you out there listening who might know a little bit about graffiti, most people don't, but Baltimore has a very, very unique way of painting, unique way of writing. Philadelphia has a really unique way too. So if you look at graffiti from Baltimore or Philadelphia or San Francisco, you can almost immediately tell where that person is from. So I was seeing the really unusual graffiti in town, and then you know, I've told this story to a lot of people. Do you remember the TV show PBS?
Oh yeah.
For viewers like you
Yeah,
remember PBS? Well, if you're from a certain age demographic out there and you're listening, there was a public access cable television channel called PBS, Public Broadcast System. And most of what they played was documentaries. And one weekend they had a marathon where they played 2 documentaries back to back. They played Beat Street and they played Wild Style. Oh, and then they played Style Wars, which were these 3 hip hop documentaries that like featured a lot of like graffiti and street art. And I must have watched hours and hours and hours and hours of this documentary, and I was like, man, what are these like outlaw New York badass cool artist guys doing on the trains? I want to do that. So I got my little 3-ring binder and my spiral notebook, and I started doodling. And like, I was always an artistic kid. I was always a good painter and good artist. And I just decided that's what I'm going to do now. So that became the obsession. That became more than just something I was doing. That became my human identity. And I remember the first time I got arrested. Like shit, I got arrested when I was, I think 17. The first time I got arrested for graffiti. And to my grandmother's credit, she sat me down and she wanted to know what I was doing, because it was totally foreign to her. Why would somebody get arrested for doing art? Like you were writing your name on things. Like why? She wasn't even mad about it. She was just confused. Like, why would you do that? And I explained it to her, and she would, to her credit, she was, for an old woman from like the World War II generation, she was pretty open-minded about it. She was like, look, I don't mind if you do that stuff, but you got to figure out how you're going to be able to do that. Like and not get in trouble. She's like, do all the artwork you want in here, you know, but like, please, like you can't. She had the right answer, right? And then about a year later, I got arrested again. And I got arrested downtown on Eastern Avenue. And they took me to central booking, and I asked her to bail me out. The bail was something tiny. It was some small little amount. The bail was like $1,000, which is like $100, right? And I used my one phone call to my grandmother, and she wouldn't bail me out. She's like, no, you're going to stay there. So I ended up doing like, I don't know, I can't remember how many days it was, but I was in BCIF in Baltimore City Jail for like a week.
And this is, you're in high school, or you've already?
I think I was 19. I was either a senior in high school or I was 19. And then, so I got out, got released. They released me out of 4th North, and I'm like standing outside of Baltimore City Jail. No money, because, you know, no cell phone. I'm like, what am I going to do? So I walked from Baltimore City Jail to my best friend's house, who lived out on the east side. I walked about 3-4 miles, and I knocked on Jason's door, and his grandmother answered. I'm like, hey, Miss Lydia. She's like, Chris, what are you doing here in the middle of the day? I was like, I kind of just got out of jail. Can I use your phone? And so I used the phone, and my best friend's grandmother talked to my grandmother, and I got a ride. And then like after that, I would say it went on pretty severe lockdown in the house. My grandmother knew that, like, all right, you're going out every night, you're engaging in some form of criminal activity. And to her credit, she really tried to implement the measures in which she thought was the best way to like contain my criminal activity. And it didn't work. You know, I was hellbent.
I want to ask you a couple questions, because I'm going to go back to the graffiti thing here in a minute. But Victor
Castoratus,
your neighbor, you talked about him a lot when we were prepping, and I thought some of it was super interesting. Like, Can you like describe him physically? I think that's a good place to start.
So he's kind of built like you, but way shorter, right? Like I'll tell you.
Probably 5'11".
So I mean, and for those of you watching, Osher's pretty jacked. Osher's pretty brolic, right? The big beard, the long hair. He had a huge walrus mustache, massive biker walrus mustache. Never wore a shirt. Anytime you ever saw him, he was shirtless or wearing a dirty cut. Do you know what a cut is?
Yeah.
He was wearing a dirty cut, and he was probably 5'5" with like full prison body.
For all of you who don't know what a cut is, it's what outlaw motorcycle gangs. It's their it's a leather vest.
His was jean, but yeah.
Yeah, or a jean vest, and it has the cut. So whatever the motorcycle gang, they had to earn that to get it, and it'll have their stuff. So like it's probably one of the most prized possessions in an OMG.
Pagan's MC, Baltimore, Maryland, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that thing was dirty and disgusting, covered in oil. Like it was just gross, right? Super long hair, like hair down past his shoulders. He looked more like a biker than the stereotype cartoon bikers on television. And this was like in the early 90s. He looked like this: full sleeves, throat, full chest, like completely suited up, tattooed. And he talked with that. I'm gonna try and replicate it, but he talked with that growl. He talked like he really talked like this. Hey, what's going on, Chris? I heard you're Dottie's boy. My grandmother's name was Dorothy. You're Dottie's boy. You live next door. And the way I first met him was real crazy. And then, he...
Tell us about that dog incident.
Yeah, so we had a little teeny tiny, in the backyard, we had a little teeny tiny, like, parking pad that was like a... big enough for like 4 cars to park on it. And my grandmother had an old, worn out, rusty work truck that had been my grandfather's. So the old work truck was back there forever. And there was an old basketball net with like a worn out basketball. There was an old basketball rim with like a worn out, rotten net back there. And I would go back there and shoot hoop a little bit. I'm back there shooting hoop one time. And Mr. Vic had these 2 huge dogs. He had a massive pit bull and a boxer. I was out there playing ball one day, and the dogs got loose, and the dogs came over, and they attacked the ball, and then they had jumped all over me. They didn't bite me, but they knocked me down and were all over top of me and attacking the ball and barking. It was pretty scary, I'm a 13-year-old, but I'm a small 13-year-old. I look like I'm like 10 or 11. And these dogs, I don't know how big they were. Bigger than Ember, for sure. Yeah. Big block-headed bully pit and a huge boxer. These dogs are going crazy. Rah, 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 rah. I'm in fear for my life on the ground, balled up, right? Thinking for sure I'm about to get mauled and killed by these dogs. And then I just look over and I see this dude come running, and his hair's flowing out behind him, the walrus mustache, and he's in motorcycle boots, no shirt ever, never wore a shirt. Comes running out, and he just socks one of these dogs. Boom! Grabs the other dog, like Superman Thor style, just throws the dog. Get the fuck off him. Get the fuck out. Ah. Picks these dogs up by the neck, yokes these dogs, rips them into the house. He screamed the whole time. Total chaos, right? And I sit up, and I'm like I'm shaking, I'm like wiping the gravel off of me. I'm just sitting there stunned. And he comes back. He's like, hey, little man. He's like, hey, little man, are you all right? He's got the real heavy accent, real crazy growl voice, from Baltimore. I'm like, I don't know. He's like, oh, man. He's like, you're Dottie's boy, ain't you? So my grandmother's name is Dorothy. And people called her Dot or Miss Dot or Dottie. Now, he's a pagan motorcycle club chapter leader, and my grandmother's like an old church lady, so they don't really interact that much, but they're neighbors. They live 50 feet apart from each other. He's like, you're Dottie's boy, ain't you? I was like, yeah. He's like, hey, man. He's like, I don't want you to feel like you can't come out here and just play a little bit of basketball, right? He's like, I'll tell you what, anytime you come out here, you want to play some ball, or you look over here, and anytime you see my garage doors open, you feel free to just come on over. If you see me working on them bikes or wherever, you just come on over and you say hi. You can always, it's always cool if I'm around, man. Don't ever worry about them dogs. If you see me and see the motorcycles, come on over. he worked on bikes. He was like a gearhead, and he had a shop in there where he worked on and he fabricated and he customized motorcycles. So I would go in his garage, and there'd be like 3 huge, not motorcycles, choppers. He worked on choppers, and he painted them. And like, I remember every year he would repaint his sled, some crazy candy, pinstriped, you know, huge ape hanger, sissy bar in the back. Like, I don't even know how many cc's. Like, I don't even know what a big chopper is, but a massive, massive chopper. And I'd come over there, and the garage door would be open. He'd see me, he'd wave, and I'd go over there, and he was cool as to me. He treated me, and over time, I just kind of became the little shop rat. And you know, like, it was weird because like my stepfather like proclaimed to be this sort of like evangelical Christian pastor, paragon of the Bible, and all I ever saw him do was abuse the out of people around him. He was never kind ever to anyone. But yet my neighbor is this career criminal who is a chapter leader of one of the most notorious motorcycle gangs in the country. I come to find out later. At the time, I didn't know that. And he was just nice as to me. He was always warm. He was always kind. I'd come over. He'd be like, I can remember him. I coming over. He's like, "Hey, little man." He called me little man. Hey, little man. You see this? He's like, "That's called a shovel head." He told me like what the difference were in like, you know, carb heads, and like explain to me how bikes work, and like show me how tools work. And like, I'd come over and be like, "What are you doing?" And be like, "Oh man." And he'd tell me like what, you know, what he was doing on the bike, why he was doing it, how the tools worked. Like, he was just cool as shit.
What did that mean to you as a kid coming from where you had come from?
At the time, I don't think I appreciated it, but over time I started to realize that you cannot judge people by like what other people tell you. You got to like judge people on their individual character.
Life. I mean, that's a lesson in humanity.
That was and that's hard to learn. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I couldn't understand why I liked being around Mr. Vic. I just knew I liked being around him. You know what I mean? Cause he was a very, very hyper masculine figure. You know, he's jacked, his prison body. Of course he'd been in and out of prison, right? Yoked, his super nice, scary looking dude, but just super, super fucking nice. And I can say to this day, every interaction I ever had with him was a good one. And I got some cool stories. Living next door to a pagan motorcycle club chapter leader, you're going to see some shit. And I had some cool experiences with him.
Tell us about him sticking up for you in the clubhouse.
Yeah. So I don't know if his house was a clubhouse, but it was certainly an informal clubhouse, right? Like if you're a high ranking heavy hitter with the pagans, people are going to hang out at your crib, especially the fact that he worked on bikes and he had a shop there. Like, so there was always bikers there, always. Right. And I was so used to seeing guys. And like I didn't know what the pagans were, but I just knew all these guys were all there, and they were wearing like their little baseball uniform, their cut. They all wore the cut. The cut all looked the same. They all kind of looked the same. They're all big tatted up dudes with the boots with the buckles and the chain wallet and the shades and the long hair and like all tatted up. And I remember going over there one time, and Vic wasn't in the garage, but the garage was open, and there was a bunch of bikers in there. And I'm the shop rat, hanging out, and I go over there, and I must have been like 13 or I must have been like 14, maybe 15 at the time. And Vic had like, you know, milk crates and like tools and shit all over the garage. He had a huge garage. It was much bigger than the garage that you have. Mm-hmm. But the garage was like the size of his house, which is crazy. I'm in there, and I'm sitting on a pair of milk crates, and I'm just kind of hanging out, and there's a shitload of bikers in there, and they're partying, because that's all real bikers. That's all they do. They party and get and work on bikes. It's all they do 24 hours a day. And I'm sitting there on the milk crate, and I'm just kind of observing, and this dude walks over, and I don't remember his name, but I remember him very clearly what it looked like. He was a huge dude, and he was blonde. And he was like, "Hey, the f off there." And I was like, "Oh, what?" And he came at me like real aggressively and real nasty. And he's towering over me. He's like, "The f are you doing in here? Get the f." Oh, sorry, we're trying to not to demonetize. He's like, "Get the F out of here. Who said this effing kid could be in here? Get out." He like real nasty, right? And I'm like, "Oh no, it's okay. Mr. Vic said I don't give a F. Get out of here." You know what I mean? Real aggressive. And I remember this so clearly. It sounded like almost like the record scratched. It got real quiet. There was probably 5 or 6 guys in there, and everyone went like this. And they turned, and the garage door opened, and Vic came out. He had gone in the house to like do whatever, like, you know, and he'd gone in the house for a minute. And he comes out, and everyone like heard this dude yelling at me. They heard the garage door open, and they all turned and they saw Vic come out. And Vic came out, and this look came over his face. And he came over, and this sounds corny, right? Like telling this story now sounds corny, but this really happened. He came over and he got in this dude's face. And I'm not going to use the language because we're trying to not demonetize. Shout out to YouTube. But yo, when I say he punked this dude, he effing like street style, prison style punked this dude. Don't you ever effing come up here? It's my back the, you know, really, you know, real ugly, right? And what's crazy is Vic is like 5'5", 5'6". This dude had to be 6'3", and the dude folded. The dude folded bad, like, oh, yo, hey, Vic, yo, I'm sorry. Hey, I'm sorry, man. I didn't know. Yeah, I just thought he was like, I don't give a fuck. Rah. He's like, you know, he's allowed to be here. It's Dottie's boy. That's what he just called me. He called me little man, or he called me Dottie's boy. That's fucking Dottie's boy. Little man, he can be here. Blah, 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 back. And the dude, the bitch came out on the dude bad, like, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Vic, I didn't know, you know, da, da, da. And then he was like coming to me, he's like, hey, shorty, my bad. He's like, you want a soda? You know, I'm sorry, la, 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 la. And at the time, I was really nervous about the whole thing. I was like, oh man, I hope Mr. Vic isn't mad at me. I was just sitting in the shop, but I didn't, now looking back at it with like adult perspective, like that means, that finally tells me like, yo, Vic is like a real shot caller, a real hitter. Because if a dude like that gets in another man's face, especially like these aren't like office workers or golfers or even military guys. These are outlaw bikers, real 1% outlaw bikers from one of the most notorious bike crews in the country. And Vic yammed on this dude, and the dude folded, like punked this dude up bad, which tells me now Vic was a very, very serious player, because like, that's a code, and like, I don't care who you are. If some man gets in your face, if your boss got in your face at work like that, the work rules would be off. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. If a dude got in your face like that at the bar, the work rules would be off. But if you're a made member in a motorcycle gang and a dude gets in your face, the only dude who talks to you like that is somebody who's a very dangerous person. And at the time, I was nervous because I was like, oh no, I started an argument and Vic must be mad at me. But now looking back, I was like, damn, that was like,
what do you think? Like, what do you think it was between you and Vic? Why did he take you in?
Well, I never knew the answer to this, but I've told my story about Vic to people now as an adult, and I always get the same answer from men. They're always like, oh, the answer's very clear. Vic probably came from a shitty childhood, and he saw you, and he just decided to be cool to you. And it's kind of weird. I thought about that in my mind. Like, where I live now, there's a kid who lives across the street who's about 11. His name's Bear, right? And Bear's not from a bad background, but I see little Bear playing out in the street, right? And if I was walking down the street one day, and look at me, I'm tatted up, Army Ranger, MMA, jiu-jitsu, tough guy, whatever the language you want to use. I'm like a cool guy like Vic now, right? If I was walking down the street and I saw 2 dogs with Bear, I would go smash those dogs and make sure Bear was okay. I'd be like, Bear, you all right, man? Like, look, shorty. Anytime you're out here, you're playing ball, it's all good, dude. Like, you know, I would probably do the same thing. It was just some masculine shit. And if my garage was open, and like, I don't work on motorcycles, but like, I'm always tinkering with my guns and my gear and all that kind of stuff. If I was out there tinkering in the garage and I saw a little Bear come by, stick his head in the garage, I'd be like, yo, man, come on in. What's up? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think it's just like the right thing to do. And I think Vic was just a, you know, for all his criminal shit, he was still like a stand-up masculine dude. And I think he just did the right thing.
Do you think that like affected you later in life, and like, you know, sticking up for underdogs and looking out for people in different jobs? Or
I don't think it didn't affect me for like sticking up for the underdog, but it definitely, because there was another series of people in my life, it definitely made me realize that like I am only judging people on their character. I don't care what your background is. I don't care what you say you do. I don't care about any of that. Right? I've been like the majority of my friends through my life have either been fighters or killers or like criminals. not that like I was gravitating towards those people, but I've been surrounded because where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we'll talk later about my best friend Ryan and some of the other people I was closely associated with. But like it taught me at a very early age, especially with the juxtaposition of my so-called Christian pastor stepfather, that like really people, you should judge their character on their actions. That is the only thing I care about, what their actions are like. I don't care what you say you do. You know, I don't care if you work at the puppy orphanage, but if you're like a piece of shit, you're a piece of shit. If you're a good dude, you're a good dude.
One more good pagan story because I thought it was good. Tell me about tell the audience about the wheelie burnout.
Oh my God.
Front lawn.
Oh man, listen, look, I've been around the world, and I've been in combat with Delta. I've fought forest fires in California. I've done the Deadliest Catch. I've seen a lot of cool man shit. Right, this is the coolest shit I've ever seen a man do. So Vic is having another big, huge biker party at his house, right? There must have been 20 or 30 choppers outside of his house. And for those of you listening out there who know bikers, you know how obnoxious and loud their parties can be. I'm sure you've met bikers before. And they're obnoxious. They're loud as right? They're partying. They're listening to their butt rock. Milling about. They always listen to bad music, right? So I walk next door, and they're having a big party, and Vic is nowhere to be seen. But there's ear-splittingly loud music. There's choppers everywhere. No Vic. And the music stops, and I see Vic and his old lady come out of the garage door. And, you know, he's in his typical uniform, shirtless with the cut. He's got the Ray-Ban aviator shades on. And she is totally like a biker broad. She's got the crazy teased up hair. She's got the wife beater low cut on. She's got the 9 million bangles on and shit, and the long feather earrings. And they are screaming at each other. They are having a straight up ghetto meltdown. All your shit out in the street. Rah, 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 rah. I don't give a They're really going at it, right? And Vic at the time had the biggest chopper I've ever seen. I don't really know what CCs constitute a chopper, but at the time, Vic had the biggest motorcycle I've ever seen, right? Full custom, slammed to the ground sled, super long bars on the front, raked out as super high, like ape hanger bars, and a huge sissy bar on the back, and it was candy painted, right? Chrome everywhere, and this thing was like the back tire the size of a mountain, the front tire was this big. It was crazy looking, right? And they're screaming and yelling at each other. He's like, I don't give up, rah. And he had a little postage stamp front lawn, and then the front lawn dipped into the street. There was about a 3-foot drop into the street. He gets on the bike, he revs the bike, rah. And he's doing donuts standing up on the bike. Like he's standing on the bike and he's got his foot on the ground. He's doing donuts, which is already pretty badass, right? He's doing donuts on the bike. And then he guns this chopper and he jumps it into the street standing up. He's standing up the whole time. He guns his chopper, jumps it into the street. And while standing up, like wheelies and skirts out of there down the street, leaving a huge trail of smoke behind him. I'm like 15. And I'm like, that is the fucking sickest shit I've ever seen in my life. And even now as an adult, if I were to see somebody do that right now, I'd be like, that is the sickest shit I've ever seen in my life. And I didn't realize this until later. Like real bikers, they're like real riders. They're not out there just riding to be a part of like their club. Like the bike is their life. I've never seen someone do that to this day. Maybe someone out there is listening who has a sled, but go out right now and get on your bike. And while standing, donut through your lawn and then jump that shit into the street and wheelie it down the street while standing up on like I don't even know how big, 1,000 pounds, 2,000 pounds. I don't know how much those bikes weigh, but they're massive.
Yeah.
And yeah, so he just did some trick rider shit. And like looking back on him, I'm like, oh, that's probably the reason you're the chapter leader, dude. You know,
did he ever give you any life advice?
He didn't give me life advice, but he did give me my first weed bowl. He's the first time I smoked weed
Mm-hmm.
was with him. I was in the backyard. I was in the backyard again, and he comes over. He's like, "Hey, Chris." He's like, I remember this so clearly. The pine trees behind me. He's like, "Hey, Chris." He's like, "You smoking weed with your little friends?" And I wanted to sound cool for Mr. Vic. I was like, yeah, I do pot yeah, I love pot, Mr. Vic." He's like, "All right, little man, I got something for you." And he had a deer antler bowl, right? Because he had a shop with like a press and all the tools in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how he did this, but it was like the tip of an antler. It was about that big. And he had drilled a hole, and he had drilled a curved hole in it somehow. And he had a really nice weed pipe, and it was loaded up with weed. He's like, "Here, you take this." And he's like, "Anytime you see me out back here," he's like, "you can smoke some weed with your friends. I ain't gonna tell Miss Dot." He's like, "Don't let Dottie find that, yo. You let Dottie find that, she's gonna be mad at you." You know, he's got the real heavy accent. I was like, "All right, Mr. Vic." And I remember my other friend Chris coming over, and the very first time I smoked weed was out of Mr. Vic's antler pipe.
That's great.
I lost that pipe decades ago, but to this day, I would love to know what happened to that thing. It was a cool little piece of memorabilia.
What last pagan question? What happened to Vic? How did he die?
I don't know. I have a couple friends now. Well, I wouldn't say friends, but I have a family friend who has a cousin who's a pretty high-ranking pagan. I'm not going to go into who he is. And he asked the guy, like, "Hey, do you know this name?" And the guy just said the name sounded familiar, but he didn't know. And then I have another friend who's a pagan from a different state who is from that generation. And he said he was going to do a background look on the guy. But the thing is, I have a feeling the way his last name is spelled, I know how it's pronounced, but I don't know how it was spelled.
Do you remember his biker name?
Just Vic. I don't know if I never heard anyone call him anything other than Vic, but it was Victor Castoratus. And maybe that could be spelled any number of ways, but my assumption would be that he would be.
I got a feeling that when this goes out onto the interwebs, bro, we'll figure out who Vic was.
If someone is out there and they're associated with the pagans and you find out the name or what happened to Victor Castoratus lived in Baltimore County and he was living there in the late 80s, early to mid 90s time frame. I'd love to know what happened to him. He was a good dude. Victor Castoratus.
Half Asian in Baltimore. You said you never had an Asian friend in your life. How did that shape your identity, dude?
Well, I can remember when I was really young, still living with my mother, I didn't like the fact that I looked different than everybody. Which is really sad to hear, right? Like that's with your self-esteem and your personality. But it turned out to be awesome as I got older, because when I got older, I had way more friends of other races. Baltimore at the time, it's less so now, but Baltimore at the time was very, very, very racially stratified. There's white and there's black and then there's nothing else. So you're talking, 48% black, 48% white, and 4% other. Now it's a lot different. There's been a huge influx of like Latin people and things like that. But at the time when I was growing up, I would say it was one of the most racially stratified cities in the country, or regions in the country. And it was a good benefit because as I got older, I started having a lot more friends of other races. I think it's just because like when you're mixed race, you kind of fall in that in between.
Well, not only that, you learn to become a chameleon, dude, because you just got to try to fit in where you can fit in.
I would say there was definitely an element of that. There was an element of that when I was younger, no longer, but there was an element of that when I was younger for sure.
Your birth mother tried to find you when you were 16. What was that court situation like?
In summation, it was a fucking mess. Obviously. My birth mother absconded. She had family in the area. There was a brief period of time when I was really young, when I was like 6 or 7, where she tried to get Child Protective Services and lawyers involved and took my family to court. A bunch of ugly, messy court proceedings. There was a minor court precedent set in my name. I'm the first person in the history of Maryland to be, so my mother, the evil person, she's the first woman in the history of Maryland to win the custody of as a non-biological mother of a child. the court ruled that my real mother, my birth mother, Kim is her name. The court ruled that my real birth mother, Kim, was so incompetent, she wasn't allowed to like raise me. So I was given court custody to my mother, who was even more psychopathic, crazy person. So that all went down. And then when I was 16, my real mother, my genetic mother, Kim, tried to get back in touch with me. I guess she married up some military guy. She was like, oh, I'm going to try and get in touch with you. And that was a mess. And the way that entire thing ended, she sent me a check for $100 on my birthday. And then I never heard from her again. I have no idea what happened to her, where she is. All I know is her name on my birth certificate. I have no idea whether she's alive or dead.
Kind of frequency hopping, shifting a little bit. I just have a couple other like questions. These are kind of my own curiosity. Growing up around abusive people who use religion as a weapon, how did that shape your view of faith?
You know, I think for a lot of people, it's really easy to go down the atheist path, you know, like F religion and F religious people, blah, 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 blah. But I kind of went a different path. As I got older, like I'm a big time bookworm. I used books as an escape, especially in the chaos of the house. Started reading at an extremely early age. And to this day, there hasn't been a day that's gone by in my life where I don't read. I read every night before I go to bed. Like it's just interwoven in my personality. But I started reading scripture out of spite. I started thinking like, when I got a little bit older, I realized like, all right, I know that this dude is a fucking moron. Like I know that. I know that this guy is dumb as fuck. Dumb as F. Sorry, YouTube. I know that this guy is stupid. So I'm going to start reading what he's reading because I know that I can use it against him. So I started reading scripture out of spite. And it turned out to be fascinating. It turned out to be some of the most interesting stuff I'd ever read. Just from like a narrative perspective, right? And I'm not very religious, but I would say reading the scripture at that point started a little fire inside of me that made me want to consume more and more and more religious text to kind of see what all of this was about and what. And I started noticing commonalities and I started noticing patterns and I noticed that things that everyone believes in, right? So my belief started to change, that like there is a common thread through the human condition that all people believe in. And if that's like sort of like almost like a mathematical truth, right? Then there must be something to it.
What do you think that common thread is?
It's pretty basic. I think from my perspective, most religions are trying to explain something that's extraordinarily profound to a large group of people that are generally uneducated. Now it's 2025. We have we have NASA moon rocks in our pocket. We have access to everything, but through the majority of humanity, most people have been very uneducated. And it's very difficult to describe profane concepts to people that are A, completely uneducated, or B, people that have no idea what you're fucking talking about, right? And that commonality is that, like, I think people that are religious tend to dedicate their mental energy into working towards a higher state of self. And that's kind of what it all comes down to. You know what I mean? And that human beings are warped. Human beings are extraordinarily fallible. So that message has been warped and become fallible all over the world. But I think the common message is that human beings have a natural need to want to focus and use their mental energy to move towards a better state of self.
You kind of explained reading the Bible kind of as like classic literature, and you became fascinated.
Yeah.
What spoke to you?
I think the Bible's full of bangers, dude. The Bible's full of bars, dude. You know what I mean? The Bible is full of like one-line bars. I am a fan of classical literature. Anyone that knows me in real life, if you're watching this and you're seeing this part, like I'm like a big time nerd for classical Greek and Roman literature. It's kind of the backbone of what I consume. But the Bible is really full of like some awesome anecdotes. It's full of like, like people look at like classical stuff like Marcus Aurelius, like, Stoicism has become this big sort of avant-garde fatty thing for like vet bros, right? If you're like a tatted up TRT vet bro, Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism, that's like your shit, right? Because Marcus Aurelius, he's full of bangers, he's full of one-liners. Well, the Bible's full of bangers and one-liners too. And the Bible's full of like really, really interesting stories of the human condition. I think once you sift through, like we've been spoon-fed the highlights of the Bible, but once you kind of get a little deeper and start like reading some of the sidebars and the side quests in the Bible, it's fascinating reading.
I always think it's interesting, right? I believe in God. I don't know if I'd call myself a religious person, but I'm definitely a Christian. I definitely have a belief in a higher power, God, all that kind of stuff. But people think that like Christianity is all about peace, and I do think Jesus was a peaceful person, but the Bible is a war manual, dude. Like,
the Old Testament is about the Old Testament is about a desert genie that lays waste to like his enemies, you know what I mean? And it's very esoteric and full of like Egyptian mystery religions and desert genies, and
there's some real
genocides,
and there's some like real war fighting, like
there's some hardcore shit in the Bible.
Yeah,
dude.
yeah.
There's like there is 2 stories of women decapitating men in the Bible. It's like the Bible's full of some hardcore shit. You just gotta like, I think if you're gonna read the Bible, there's a million different translations. You got to find the translation that works for you.
Yeah. So I always, as a veteran and as, somebody who interviews a lot of veterans, we all went to war, and people always like, well, how was that a juxtaposition of you going to war and being, a Christian? I'm like, bro, you read the Bible? Like, there's plenty of instances in the Bible where, God used one army to decimate evil people. So,
yeah.
Your grandmother was a devout Catholic and one of the most moral people you knew.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile good religious people with the hypocrites?
Oh, it's easy. It's not the framework of religion. It's the framework of the person. It's pretty good examples like a gun, right? Are guns evil? Right? Are guns inherently evil? If guns are wielded by bad people, they can do a lot of damage. Guns are wielded by good people, they can do a lot of good things. Religion is just the tool that is wielded by the individual.
It's a great person. You mentioned that, you work with a Mormon and an Orthodox Jew now. What do you see in them that you didn't see in your stepfather?
They are, man, Amelia and Kevin are awesome dudes. They're awesome dudes. They're hard workers. They're very intelligent. They're both PhDs. They're both physics PhDs. So these are smart dudes. These are not stupid dudes. They're both physics PhDs. They're both willing to discuss their religion at any moment. You just come up to them with the most arcane question. They really, really know the ins and outs of their religion. They're happy to share it. They don't proselytize. And what I find fascinating is that they work in cubes next to each other. And these 2 dudes on the surface should be mortal enemies. And they have the best conversations ever. These guys, I love just kind of showing up and then like throwing a stone into the pond and like listening to these two dudes like philosophize on it. Like they actually practice their religions. Amelia is very, very devout, Orthodox. And he's very open to share why he does what he does, the religious holidays. He quotes scripture, but he's never forcing on it. And like the fact that he doesn't force it on people makes it more interesting that you want to talk to him about it. And Kevin's the same way with Mormonism. And if you're like, hey, look, man, I don't, that's not what I believe in. They're not forcing it on you. They're just sharing their.
Dude, Mormons are some of the nicest people I've ever met.
Yeah.
They're smart. Just because they're Mormon doesn't make them smart, but they're good people, man. And they're like natural warriors. A lot of them prepare, like if there's ever a bad thing to happen.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like hook up with the Mormons, bro. They got a plan. I'm sure.
I with Kevin so bad. He always comes in early, and I'm always like a little bit late. And every day I come in, I'm like, Kevin, I was just with the boss. you're in trouble, bro. Like they are not happy right now. He's like, what? I was, dude, they are in there talking right now about what they're gonna do with you. You know, and like, cause Kevin has like 6 kids.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, what do you mean what they're gonna do with me? I was like, I don't know if you're gonna be employed here tomorrow, dude. It's like they found out what happened, and like every single day I f- with him, like every day.
How does he take it?
He's cool now. Like it's like our little rap. But every day I come in and tell Kevin that I was just with the bosses and they were talking about firing him.
I got one last question before we dive into your warrior's calling. Do you consider yourself religious, spiritual? What's your relationship with faith?
I'm not religious at all. I don't believe in dogma whatsoever. I think using the term "I'm spiritual" is so like, look, I'm not like a West Coast hippie crystals chick, but I will say that I've confronted my own spirituality many times, and I definitely believe in an all-encompassing, active form of consciousness.
Yeah, you and I had a very interesting conversation about it yesterday. It was cool.
And
I'm kind of like you. I believe what I believe. I believe in what I believe very passionately, but I also I love having conversations about, you know, those higher level conversations about religion, consciousness, spirituality, because I just think it's, you know, we've divided ourselves. I feel like, in my personal opinion, religion has kind of been like it became like politics, bro. Like you're in this camp and you're in that camp, and if you're in this camp,
dogma.
You know, you have man,
Dogma.
And then, you know, I think when you start peeling back some of the layers, dude, to your point that you were saying earlier, there are a lot of commonalities. You know, like be a good human, like be a good person, be good to your neighbor, and I think that's some things that gets, you know, get missed. I was raised in a super evangelical house.
Oh yeah.
But I watched people treat each other like crap if you weren't in that, you know, confine, which I thought was funny. You know, my family was very only hung out with other Christian people type things.
It's not funny, it's sad.
Yeah, but when you go and read the Bible, like Jesus hung out with like, you know, the outlaw motorcycle gangs of that time. He hung out with tax collectors and prostitutes. And I think sometimes that gets lost in religious people. It's like,
and I'm going to throw this little nugget out there. We're not going to go too deep into this, but a little nugget out there. Paul was the main architect of the New Testament. Paul, the reason that Catholicism ended up in Rome, like, you should look into what Paul was doing when he was still Saul. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a little seed in there that's not very Christ-like. There's a difference between Christ and the dogma. Yeah. But my personal religious view is that, if you want to use religion as the term, I believe that there is a persistence of energy, and I believe that everything around us is connected by some form of unexplainable, immutable consciousness.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Well, before we dive deep into your warrior's calling, which is the next chapter, which is going to be dope, let's take a quick break. So now, kind of as we dive into this next chapter, I call it the warrior's calling, dude. Your grandmother's husband was a World War II medic on a surgical train in France. Tell us about those mobile hospitals. You and I had a cool conversation about it.
So my grandmother's husband and his 2 brothers were all World War II vets. And my grandmother's cousin was a highly decorated D-Day veteran who landed on Omaha Beach on Dog Sector 3. That was portrayed in the movie Saving Private Ryan. And he's got a whole lore behind him that was really big as to why I became a soldier. But going back to my grandfather and the surgical train, I always thought this was very cool. My grandfather got to France very late in the war, when the war was winding down. And back then they had trains that would go from the front back to the rear. And these trains were outfitted as mobile hospitals. So the train would come up to the front, they would deload the guys that were injured or needed help, and then the train would take them back to the rear. And as they went back to the rear, they would get work on the train. And we don't do that anymore, but I always thought that was what a cool, you know, thing to do, work on a surgical train as a medic during the war. So that was a pretty honorable thing that he did. And then his brother, shout out to my Uncle Vernon, and I think that might be where I get some of my thing about like always having to dress right and look nice. His brother Vernon was a platoon sergeant in the Marines in the Pacific in World War II. And I know that he fought in the Solomons. I don't know too much more about his lore, but fought in the Solomons. He was in heavy shit. And I can just remember my Uncle Vernon always having the perfectly slicked hair, the gold-rimmed sunglasses, the turquoise ring, big-ass turquoise pinky ring, shiny silver, like gray herringbone suit with the turquoise tie and the pin in it, like always just looking right, like with a cane. Like Uncle Vernon was fly. And
what about your Uncle Andy on the 29th Infantry, you know, on Dog Sector?
Yeah.
How well did you know him? Did he ever tell you any stories?
Oh, yeah. So when I was very young, my grandmother used to take me down to my Uncle Andy's house, and he lived way down in St. Mary's County in the Eastern Shore of Maryland, which, you know, 2 hours away from Baltimore, but that might as well have been on the other side of the country as a little kid. He lived on a little tiny idyllic farm, St. Mary's County, and he was a tiny little man, 5'5" maybe, super soft spoken, talked like this, and he was a highly trained watchmaker for Bulova. So he spent his entire life with a loop, you know, like a jeweler's loop on, as a watchmaker, craftsman. But little did I know, or anyone else know, that he had been a platoon sergeant in the 29th Infantry Division on D-Day. And when I was late in high school, I did a report on him. I did a book, not a book report, but like an end of year report where I like took audio of him and interviewed him and stuff, and learned his entire story. And long story short, he landed in the first wave of guys that landed on Dog Sector with the 29th ID. He made it to D-Day +7, and he was wounded horrifically by a 88 millimeter artillery shell that blew up overhead, tore his lung apart, tore half of his foot off, and he spent 18 months in a British hospital learning to speak and walk again, and fully recovered from his injuries. But for the rest of his life, I think that's why he spoke so quietly. He said for 5 years he could barely speak in more than a whisper because the hole that went through him was big enough to put a canteen in. So he lost half of a lung from this fucking artillery shell. And his story is insane. He told me his entire story, like had his life saved on the battlefield by a medic, riding on the back of a Jeep, coming, you know, regaining consciousness on the back of a Jeep that's going through the forest, getting shot at, coming to in a windmill, like he was in a surgical like area that was in a windmill. And then the last thing he remembers is waking up in a hospital in England, and he won a Bronze Star V on the beach for an action that involved his group of guys helping a bunch of engineers cross a tank trap under fire. And what's very interesting is that when Steven Spielberg, he became like a well-known person in the local VFW. He was very involved in the local VFW. Became a VFW like leader type person, and just a kind-hearted, awesome guy. But when Steven Spielberg did his movie, he wanted to get a variety of veterans that had actually been on the beach to screen the movie, pre-screen the movie before audiences saw it. So he got like 400 different vets from across the country, flies them all to LA, and they were allowed to sit in and watch the first showing of that movie. And my Uncle Andy said about half of the guys got up and like left the theater. They just couldn't watch it. And because he said it was too real. And then my Uncle Andy was involved in some group of vets who were trying to get Saving Private Ryan to become like a required curriculum for like history in like Baltimore County schools or Maryland schools. And it didn't go through because the movie's too violent. But like, yeah, he spoke very highly of Spielberg. He spoke very highly of the movie. And he told me a lot of things that happened over there. He told me about he went into depth about it. He told me about the workup, the 2 year, they worked up for that shit for 2 years. And the workups that they did were physical fitness and small unit tactics, which is awesome to think about because, like, man, it's making me a little emotional. My uncle was a real grunt. You know what I mean? My uncle was a real mother grunt. And at the time interviewing him as a high school kid, I didn't get this. And then he died before I came home as a Ranger. So I never had the opportunity to talk to him like soldier to soldier. But like I can remember like I can remember when I was going through the Indoc, going on these super long road marches. And I can kind of remember like his aura behind me, like, hey, son, like, I did this with metal canteens. You can do this. You know what I mean? I did this in Corcoran boots. You can do this. I'm 5'6" and I could do this. You can do this. He told me that they would go on every single morning. They would go on a 5-mile boot run, because to them, their mentality was like, if we can maximize our men's physical fitness, then we can maximize the amount that we can move every day. And yeah, it was a super interesting guy, a real infantryman's infantryman, and it also made me realize that like grunts don't look a certain way. You know what I mean? There's all kinds of different grunts out there, but like if you're a real soldier down in here, then you're a real soldier. He was a real one.
I remember later on in my career working with the Tier 1 unit and seeing some of those dudes that were super freaks. They're not the dudes that you would think of, like from the movies. If you saw some of the guys walking by on the street, you wouldn't know that they worked for some super, you know, moto unit dude.
I have a mentor in my life who was a former C Squadron ground commander in the unit, whatever they're called now.
I think Delta Force is probably the worst kept secret in the U.S. Army.
Right. Well, clearly they're not called Delta Force anymore. They're not called CAG anymore. But the point is, he was the senior ground commander for C Squadron C Troop in CAG, and he looks like an accountant. Yeah. You know what I mean?
What was your kind of, you know, you mentioned your decision point for going in the military, like that PBS marathon on graffiti culture, kind of, you know, shared some of your art career. And I guess, you know, we didn't dive into that. I'll dive into that maybe on the back half. You know, what hooked you on going in the military?
Well, it was a confluence of things, and shout out to PBS again, because PBS played a major role in shaping my malleable young person's brain. PBS had another marathon on the American Paratrooper. So I remember watching this marathon show on the American Paratrooper, and they were interviewing this guy down at Bragg, and he had a high and tight, you know, he had the terrible haircut. And he did this thing, I remember this so clearly. He did this thing where he took his ruck and he flipped it on over his head, over the front. And I remember thinking like, wow, what a sick ass little move that dude did. What a badass. A real man. He fucking throws his ruck on, runs off, gets on the plane, and then the next shot is the plane going overhead with the parachutes coming out. Like, man, a paratrooper. What's more badass than being a paratrooper? Jumping out of airplanes? Hell yeah, right? I was fully bought in. And then, you know, looking at my Uncle Andy, looking at my grandfather, looking at my Uncle Vernon, they were all church deacons. They were all men that worked with their hands, and they were all upright dudes that like drank black coffee, and they got up and they worked hard, right? And to me, coming from this sort of chaotic, horrific background with all these low energy, low wattage, loser men, and then I see this older generation of men, it kind of got baked into my psyche that a good dude is like a soldier who works with his hands and like drinks black coffee and like gets up early and he goes outside and mows the lawn. You know what I mean? Like sort of that like perfect Americana version of like a soldier. So I was just bound and determined I was going to be a soldier. You know, it's weird. Like I had dreams about it when I was a kid. You know, I think most guys who end up becoming grunts, they like play with guns, or they play, you know, they play guns, or they play whatever. But I was having dreams about being a soldier when I was a little kid. I just kind of knew that it was in my psyche. Like I didn't know enough to get out of my own way with like the crime and the shit that I was with like drugs and being on the street. But I knew eventually that my path would lead me to soldiering.
You were arrested multiple times for graffiti and drugs before enlisted.
Yeah.
How close were you to like going on a different path?
I think a lot closer than I'm willing to admit. You know, there's some social media influencers out there, wink, wink, who like to play up their criminal past. You know, I was in gangs, or I did this, and and they're almost like proud of it, like it's a badge. Like that's nothing to be proud of. You know what I mean? Like I'm the bag. I almost really screwed up my opportunity to do something I was born to do. Over nothing, over nothing, you know what I mean? Over a little bit of money, you know, over drugs, over spray painting my name on some shit. I'd arrested several times. Done a couple things in BCIF. Did a couple things in Baltimore County out in Towson, and had to get a lawyer to clean things up. I remember being on probation and having a PO down on Light Street. I remember I remember being on community service. Right? I remember going to community service down to Eastern Avenue in Patterson, which is East Baltimore, and working on. I was working in some field, raking or mowing or something like that, and proudly telling my community service guy, I'm going to be a soldier after this. And the dude like laughing at me like, yeah, sure you are. That's why you're down here for drug possession, mowing lawns. But I knew it was coming. And like, I don't think it's anything to be proud of to be coming from a rough background or making those decisions, because a lot of people who grow up in those areas, they don't make those stupid decisions. You know what I mean? There's social media guys out there who like to brag about how they were in gangs and shit. That ain't nothing to brag about. That's stupid. You know what I mean? You don't ever have to like choose to do crime. It's stupid. You could just work towards your goal all the time. You know what I mean? But most of us are too immature or too stupid, or in my case, too insecure to like have like a bigger vision. So yeah, I mean, when you're a kid, you're a kid. You don't know what you don't know.
You thought, what's better than a paratrooper, and then you found the Rangers. What was that moment like? We're gonna have a conversation that we just had off camera.
So there's a very specific reason that I was a Ranger, right? And it's because of one of these low effort shit-heel dudes in my family. I had an uncle named Joe. And Joe had been a paratrooper for about 4.7 minutes in the early 80s, right? He was a pogue. He was a brag. He got a red beret. I'm sure he was a 5 jump chomp. But Uncle Joe was down at Bragg for about 3 minutes in the early 80s, and he loved to talk about being a paratrooper, right? Like, now you got my Uncle Andy, who is like a Bronze Star Purple Heart vet who's a platoon sergeant on D-Day. And these are the older generation, right? You got my Uncle Vernon, who was a platoon sergeant in the Marines in the Solomons in World War II. And then you got my grandfather, who was a medic on a surgical train in France in World War II, right? But my shit-heel, low output, low energy, loser Uncle Joe, who had been a paratrooper for about 3 minutes in the 80s and never did shit. I think he worked on radios. He wasn't even a comms guy. I think he was just the guy who tinkered with radios in the shop. He just loved to talk about being a paratrooper. Oh, yeah, well, those guys never jumped out of an airplane, right? Like, oh, cool for you, right? So when I joined the Army, I got an 82nd Airborne contract, and I just remember thinking to myself, what's like one better than a paratrooper, right? Because if my effing Uncle Joe has it in him to become a paratrooper, I know that I'm better than him. So I must be better. My ceiling must be better than just being a paratrooper, because I didn't even know what a Ranger was. So, I joined the military. I went to airborne school. I go to my unit. I was supposed to go to the 82nd Airborne. I got picked up for the.
Okay. I don't want to drive that story there because
I knew that I had more in me than my Uncle Joe. So like, what's more than a paratrooper? There's got to be more out there.
We had this conversation off camera just about like Rangers and the Ranger Regiment. I have a lot of, I've been blessed to have a lot of good friends. I wasn't a Ranger. I worked around them once upon a time, but you guys are all built different. Like my best friend Jesse's a Ranger. He's been on the podcast. My other good friend Mike Edwards, a couple others that are probably coming on from the Ranger Regiment. You guys are all just wired different. Like most of the guys I know from the regiment, if they say they're going to do something, they do it. They say they're going to show up, they show up. Like they always do the thing that they say they're going to do. You guys are all, it's a lot like kind of like the Marines too. Rangers are very confident for the most part. It's just something about the regiment that just makes dudes just a little bit different too, man. Especially in a world, where you hear a lot about, the Navy SEALs. And again,
it's not the regiment. It's not the regiment.
What do you think it is then?
The regiment is just where those pre-programmed dudes aggregate. I swear to God, I've thought about this at length. I mean, I'm spiritually a Ranger. Look, I wasn't the best Ranger by any means. Actually, if you look at it on paper, I was probably a piece of shit. You know what I mean? I got my tab. I got my stripes. I went to combat. Up in the end, got kicked out like a lot of guys do, right? So I was just a guy. But I am convinced that Rangers are born as a phenotype and they aggregate to the regiment because they do not really fit in anywhere else in the world. It's the most unique environment in the military, i.e. it's the most military unique environment in the world. And it takes a very specific kind of fanatically motivated person to get there. A lot of guys get there and they're gone immediately, right? Because I think there's a lot of guys that have the physical stones to get there, right? But then to get there and then to stay there and to become vetted and become part of the community requires a certain kind of programming. And I swear, my opinion, do with it as you will, probably not the right one, but my opinion is that Rangers really are born and they aggregate there. And if they don't end up in regiment, they end up doing something destructive.
That's a great point, man. Let's talk about MEPS, man.
Yeah.
And you're like, you kind of told the story. Well, I mean, how did you end up, like, you go see a recruiter, you're like, hey, I want to do that. You take your ASVAB, and like, for a guy that's had all the issues and kind of trauma and I mean, you score like almost as high as possible on the ASVAB.
Yeah. And look, I guess you could say I'm a pretty intelligent guy, but I think that's the result like of being a bookworm who reads every day, reading every day. Since I can formulate memories, I was reading every day. And I was reading every day as an escape from the chaos and the brutality of the home that I was living in. So very well read. Go to MEPS. The number one thing I want to do, I want to jump out of airplanes. I want to jump out of airplanes. I want to carry a rifle. And I want to be cool. I want to be a grunt. So, I can't go to the Marines because the Marines don't really jump out of airplanes. So go to the 82nd. Hey, PBS did the special on the 82nd. I want to be like that guy on PBS. How do I do that? So I go to MEPS.
MEPS, for all you out there, is the Military Entrance Processing Center or system. It's wherever you go to the military, you go to MEPS first. They make you do a bunch of things. It's a horrible experience. But if you're going into any branch of the military, you have to go to MEPS, and then everybody.
It's the big factory you walk into as a civilian, and then the other side, a new recruit comes out that heads off to basic training.
Yeah.
So I go to MEPS, and I am bound and determined. I don't want to be a soldier. I don't want to be a paratrooper. I want to be a grunt. I want to be an infantryman, and I want to be a grunt, a la the movie Platoon, Apocalypse Now, all these war movies. I want to be a grunt. And I did. I had an extremely high ASVAB and GT score. My GT score is 130. I can't remember what my ASVAB was. I think it was in the 90s. Super high. And I'm about to sign up, and I remember this very clearly. This older sergeant major pulled me aside and he took me into like a little side room, and he sat down and he was like, son, he's like, you have an opportunity to like do anything you want. He's like, I know you want to be a soldier. I know you want to be an infantryman. He's like, you can still jump out of airplanes, but I just think it would be in your best interest if you went into linguistics or like intelligence. Like, he's like, you can do anything you want. Like, my ASVAB score was high enough. I had unlocked the whole, I unlocked all the skins, right? And I remember looking back on this, so stupid. I looked at this guy. I was like, fuck that. I want to be an infantryman. It's like, why? You don't even know what I was like, well, my uncle and blah, blah, blah. And I just remember him going like this, like, all right, whatever. He's like, I tried. Fuck it. It's about to suck, bro. Like, and I had no idea, but yeah, it did suck. So
do you have any regrets about not listening to him?
That's complicated. I don't know. If I had done something different, I wouldn't be where I am now, but who knows where my path would have taken me. Like, soldiering is still soldiering. You know what I mean? I think there's people that join the military and then there's soldiers. And I think soldiering is spiritual and emotional. And if it's spiritual and emotional, it doesn't really matter where you end up. But I was probably, I hate using the term destined, but I was meant to end up in the regiment.
Why was infantry so important to your identity?
Because of my Uncle Andy.
Yeah.
My Uncle Andy. And I've had, this may sound weird, but like I've talked to other, a lot of my friends, a big majority of my friends are other bat boys, because obviously. And this has been shared by other guys, but I had dreams about it. I had dreams. I didn't even know what they were, but I had dreams. I can remember from the time I was 6 or 7 until I went to Iraq. I had a very, very commonly reoccurring dream that I would have every month or every week or something like that, where I just remember marching in the desert, marching in a long column of men in the desert, marching. I can remember in the dream, I can remember it so clearly. I haven't had the dream in many years, but in the dream, marching, and then on my right side is ocean, because you can smell the salt water. It's blazing, unbelievably oven hot. And on the left side, there's like a long plain that goes up into like hill country, and it's the desert, and I can feel the wind coming off of the ocean. And I can just remember being in a lockstep line of thousands and thousands and thousands of men, and that shuffling sound of with feet scraping on the desert, and just having some load on me. I don't know if it was armor or a pack or what it was, but I can just remember having that recurrent dream of marching in the desert. And I had that dream ever since probably the beginning of my consciousness. And then what's weird is, like, after I came home from Iraq, I never had that dream again. So there was something inside of me that was driving. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know. Hey, who knows? Like, maybe some young man, some Carthaginian or some Phrygian or some Scipio Africanus legionnaire. Who knows? Maybe I'm recycling the energies of that guy. Or maybe this is all just something that, sounds romantic, and I'm just romanticizing a strange dream that I had as a kid.
You told me basic training was super effing easy for you, dude.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, like, I have a very good friend who spent a long time in the regiment. Shout outs to Les Sandusky. If you're listening, Dusky, what up? And he and I did a little pod together, and we talked about this, and he made a really good point. He goes, so to me, when I went off to basic training, it was like a big adventure. It's like, yeah, like the most awesome camp ever. And Dusky, and you guys out there served as a mortar in 175 or 375, probably know Les Sandusky. He made a really good point. He's like, well, if you're from a poor background and you're from a tough background where you're used to poverty and abuse, and, I wasn't sleeping on a real bed, sleeping on a cot. He's like, then you get here and all of a sudden you got 3 meals and a cot, and like, oh, the drill sergeant's going to yell at me. Okay. Oh, I have to get up early. Okay. Oh, now I get to go back and have another awesome meal in the DFAC. All right, cool. So, like, what's the price I have to pay for this? Doing push-ups and running around? You know what I mean? F yeah, YouTube. Yeah, like, a lot of guys want to flex, oh, basic training was easy, blah, blah, blah. But, like, if you're coming from a fractured childhood where you're in want all the time, and I say this a lot, like, I think a lot of people, young guys who come from fractured backgrounds, they respond to the discipline and the order of the military. Because it's the first time in your life you're faced with physical discipline. Not just discipline like, get on your face and give me 25. That's not discipline. I'm talking the discipline of having to get up early, have your things arranged, be accountable to the men around you, and then having strong men that you can be like, okay, my Uncle Joe is a total shitheel, but that guy, Drill Sergeant Linwood Bailey, who's from 375, that's a real man. So if that guy tells me something to do, I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? And I just took to that like it was the thing that was unlocking what I needed.
You also told me, your first Army breakfast, you were like, man, you thought it was like...
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Describe going from like starvation to abundance.
I just couldn't. I mean, to this day, I'm still a breakfast guy. I think a lot of soldiers out there are breakfast guys. Especially if you've ever had a regiment breakfast. Holy shit. Like, for those of you who don't know, the regiment eats good. The regiment doesn't eat good. The regiment eats great. That's one of the perks, right? You're going to get your ass kicked in your regiment, but you're going to eat good. But, yeah, I can remember going through my first line in basic where they got the eggs and the bacon and the sausage and the biscuit. Like I just couldn't believe it. And I think that's really deeply ingrained into me, a love of breakfast, like so many millions of other American fighting men have, probably back to, I'm going to say World War II. I think since World War II till now, that good old American soldier breakfast,
Oh,
I
yeah.
see the look in your eyes,
Yeah,
there
I
ain't
love
nothing hits like
breakfast is still my favorite meal.
you get that army scramble with that biscuit and a little jelly. Oh my God.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us where you went after base training at AIT.
I went to airborne school, had an airborne contract for the 82nd. And right before airborne school, a recruiter for the 3rd Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, came to basic training, was looking for people to go to the Old Guard. And that's the unit that serves in D.C., down in Arlington, the Dog and Pony Show. And I say that respectfully, like from the outsider's view, it's a Dog and Pony Show. And at the time, I thought that's what it was. But at the time, I had a 32-inch waist. I'm actually an inch shorter now than I used to be. I used to be over 6'2", and now I'm over 6'1". So I'm like 6'1.5". I used to be like 6'2.5". But tall, small waist, super high GT score, super high PT score. And this guy was looking for recruits for the Old Guard. And he picked me and like one other guy. And of course I was like, fuck that. I'm not going to go to no Old Guard. I'm going to go be a paratrooper. I want to be a grunt. Right. And this time I had a drill instructor. I don't know if anyone out there knows this guy, but he was with 375 for a long time. He was a reconnaissance dude for a long time. 375, Halo wings, short, jacked, badass black dude named Linwood Bailey, who was a Panama vet. And Linwood Bailey pulled me in his office. And Linwood Bailey was a fire-breathing, hardcore drill instructor, yada, 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 But he sat me down and he got through to me because he spoke to me like an adult. And he goes, look, I know that you want to go to the 82nd. You want me to be a paratrooper. He's like, you go down to the 82nd, you're going to be a nobody, right? You're going to be one of a million and you're going to be doing nothing, right? That's a good unit, but you're not going to be something special. He goes, right now, you have an opportunity to go do something that's very special. And let me tell you, for all my Ranger shit, what they're doing there is important. And I still believe that now. The mission of the Honor Guard is actually very important because it's rendering honors to the dead. And it's like not a show. It's for real. It's not theater. It's like actually rendering honors, and then we're taking dead soldiers, people who served this country, sometimes people who've died yesterday or, recently in combat, and we're laying them in the most sacred holy ground that exists in our country. It's arguably some of the most holy ground on earth, right? And he's like, what you have an opportunity to do is go down there and do something very special for a period of time, and I think you'd be an ignorant person. I think you'd be ignorant and you'd be doing a disservice to your nation if you didn't do it. And he really meant it. He said it with such sincerity. I couldn't believe it. I was like, all right, I'll do it. Like a man who I respected, not coming from a background where I didn't have any good male role models, but this guy I respected. He was the first Ranger I ever met. I'm a Ranger tell me this. All right, I'll do it. And it made a lot of sense. I was only 45 minutes from home. There's a train that goes directly from where I was stationed to my house, almost in Baltimore. At the time, it was $4. Get on train, ride the train home. And I had a very serious girlfriend at the time, too. So I wouldn't be far away from home from family. You get off of work, $1,600 every day. You got a 4-day weekend every month. It was a great gig, and I took it, and I ended up in the Honor Guard.
Tell me, you described the old guard barracks were historically protected.
Yeah.
And they were the best in the Army. Describe your living situation.
Oh man, it was awesome. Anybody who's been to Fort Myer, for those of you who don't know, just like Asher said, the barracks down there they're historically protected. I can't remember what the law is, but the barracks can't be changed on the outside of them. They don't look like Army barracks. They look like buildings that were built in like the 1800s for like officer quarters. So each room is massive. The rooms are massive. They're all newly furbished on the inside with like air conditioning and things like that. And I was just lucky enough. I got a corner room My first room in the barracks is a corner room with vaulted ceilings in a historically protected barracks that overlooks the Honor Guard parade field, and beyond the parade field is the Washington Monument. So I had this gorgeous view. I'm in DC. I'm looking good. I'm fit. Like, I just landed in the best place in the world. And you're non-deployable, so you're off every day. You're not even doing FTXs.
You were running at the Lincoln Monument, staying in shape, looking good. You were in a good place. How long did that last?
2-3 months. About 2-3 months of this idyllic existence as a young private, just getting paid to literally look good and work out.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day we're at a range, we're shooting AT4s. You remember the AT4s? They put blanks in them, the little tracers?
Like a 9mm blank.
Yeah. We're shooting the fake AT4s at a range, and a guy comes running out, and I'll never forget this. He comes out, he's got a big gulp, and he's sipping on the big gulp. He's like, man, the Pentagon just got hit by an airplane. And we were all like, shut the what are you talking about? He's like, no, the Pentagon just got hit by an airplane. Hold on. And he goes back on the radio and is like, drop everything, get on the trucks, head back to the barracks now. Throw all the shit on the trucks, LMTVs back then, ride up to the barracks. And what's crazy is we were riding on the highway on 295, and the entire highway was closed off. The entire highway was closed off. It's just us 4 vehicles on the highway, all by ourselves with one police car. And we get back to the barracks, and the barracks are...
You guys got a police escort?
I just remember there being one police car. And we get back, the barracks are buzzing with activity, and I could kind of see smoke off in the distance, and I swear to God I could smell something. I didn't know what it was, but I could just smell there was something going on. So we get back to the barracks. I remember our platoon sergeant, Bobby Stringfellow, gave us a quick little brief. We grabbed a couple little things. Like we didn't have like C or D bags prepped. We had some bag prepped, and we threw all our shit in the trucks, and we drove down to the Pentagon, which is only like not even a mile. We get to the Pentagon, and I'm an LMTV with the cap cover on the back, and I'm sitting in the back of the LMTV. I remember coming around the corner on the Pentagon and looking out, and the first thing I saw, this is so burned in my memory, I saw what looked like a gigantic Mount Everest mountain-sized pillar of like oil smoke. Like, you ever seen like oil smoke where it's so thick it looks like you put your hand in it?
Oh yeah, the Iraqi desert.
Yeah. This pillar that was unbelievably massive. I just can't even put into words how big it was. It looked as though Mount Everest were flipped upside down. This massive, massive pillar of super thick, toxic black oil smoke that looked like it was alive because it was roiling. I couldn't believe it. I've never seen anything like that, and to this day, I've never seen anything like that. And then I looked around again, and when we first got off the LMTVs, we dismounted in the parking lot, and I saw I don't know what the name of this uniform is because it's been so long, but it's the short sleeve dress uniform where the medals are on it. I think it's called the mess uniform or the C's. I don't know what it's called, but
I think it's Class B's.
Is it? Somebody out there will know, but it's the short sleeve uniform that's formal that has all your awards and your rank on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a 2-star general walking along. He was an older fellow with white hair, and he had a towel on his face, and he was pouring blood out of his face, like leaking, like bright red. I don't think it was arterial because it was on his head, but he was huge amount of blood pouring out of his face, and there was a lieutenant colonel walking with him, holding this thing on his face. And it was very clear that this dude was leaking blood, and he was, and I was like, my little private rodent brain was starting to unhinge. Like, that's a 2-star general, and he is. And then looking behind him was this giant mountain of smoke, and it started to click like, whoa, this is really, really serious. And then just yelling details. And then, so we started our little engagement there, and then we posted up right on the front door of the aperture. I must have been 50 yards away from the aperture.
When you say aperture, what do you mean?
Where the plane struck the building.
Mm.
And so I was close enough to the aperture that I could feel the actual heat from the fire. And we made, like, I don't want to say a patrol base, but we laid our stuff on the ground in a tidy little formation. There was no need to pull security or anything like that. So we weren't in a classical triangular shaped PB, but we were in like a little box formation by squad. Excuse me. And there were a couple GP mediums out there, but we weren't even in those tents yet. And all these OGAs would come over and they'd be like, hey, I need 3 of you for a detail. And we'd run off. I need 4 of you for a detail. We'd run off. And I spent 28 days there on site.
What were you doing?
The majority of what I was doing was going into the Pentagon with other government agencies and assisting in the physical recovery of items. Or now there was a mortuary affairs unit there, and like, you know, not to get grotesque about it, but there was bodies. That was the first time I'd seen bodies, like groups of dead people, body parts, and like destruction on a huge scale, like a huge scale. I can just, like, you could look and it would fill your entire field of vision. Everywhere you looked, as far as you could look from left to right, was destroyed. And the inside of the Pentagon, because the Pentagon is like these 5 concentric rings with like a gap in between them. The Pentagon, they had flushed so much water and they were trying to suppress this fire for so long because this fire was ridiculous that everything was flooded to like ankle deep. So for a while, we did site security, not like security like pulling outward facing security, but physically reinforcing some of the site. Like we were putting like these huge like steel and then often like maybe 14 by 14 wooden blocks to like shore up certain areas. Like we build them like little Jenga pieces and then put like jacks on them. Or excuse me, we'd have guys and they'd take 3 of us and we would go inside with somebody while they were doing like we would assist them while they were like trying to find like body parts, or they were doing tagging of body parts. So that we would be with them standing with this guy while this guy would walk around and he had like those little wire flags and like walking around, looking on the ground, sticking flags in the ground, looking where he thought that's probably a piece of a human remain. And there was a few days where we were detailed, where we all put on Tyvek suits and masks, and we went into like, so like where the plane hit the Pentagon, there was a big burned aperture, but that fire spread so terribly that there was lots and lots and lots of ancillary offices next to it that had been completely burned. So we were going into these offices after the fire had been suppressed in them, and we were looking for any sort of sense of item recovery. So you'd go in there and it would stink, reek of burnt plastic. Everything would be wet. Everything would be completely charred black, and looking around for anything that had survived the fire that looked like it could be recoverable. Any papers at all, any digital media. It was kind of like we were SSEing. But what really like shocked me was that coffee mugs survived this. There were coffee mugs. There were pristine looking white coffee mugs like everywhere. You would be in a room like this, be like, all right, Osher, you know, me and Osher and another guy would come in a room like this, and the whole room would be charred black, ceiling tiles down, wires down, dripping wet, everything cooked black, big flashlight, looking at stuff. There's nothing to recover in here, right? Everything in here is burned to a crisp. And you would see where the desk had burned and fallen, and then like 2 perfectly preserved coffee mugs. You know, I remember finding a coffee mug, World's Best Dad, on it. Looked perfectly pristine, because coffee mugs don't burn in fires. I didn't know that.
I didn't either. I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any firefighters out there, I'm sure you guys have seen this, but I remember that very clearly, like perfectly preserved.
How big was the actual like hole in the Pentagon where the plane hit?
It was huge. And I'm going to tell you, like, I'm going to confront this now because I've been asked this a million times, right? For those of you out there watching who think you know what hit the Pentagon, you think a missile, you think a bomb hit it, blah, 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 blah. Like, I'm telling you, a plane hit the Pentagon. I've talked about this in other podcasts. Like I was there, right? And I'm not a shill. I'm not paid by anybody. I don't give a shit about your conspiracy theories. I don't care, right? I'm just telling you the truth, what I saw with my eyeballs and what I've touched with my hands. A plane hit the Pentagon because I've seen certain structures there that only came from a plane. I've seen a huge landing carriage. Like, you know how on a plane, like I don't know how, like the wheels come down and they turn.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like the wheels, I didn't know this. The wheels on a jet are huge. I didn't really know that. I guess you think when you think about the wheels on a plane, you think about the wheels on like a Cessna or a fighter jet. But I didn't know this. The wheels on a jumbo jet are massive. Maybe not the size of a man, but they're huge. And the assembly that they're on is massive. That's a big, massive piece of steel. So I remember very clearly seeing a landing gear with the tire burned off of it. Because nothing else looks like that, right? It's like the stick with the two wheels on it. Like nothing else looks like that. And then I could very clearly see from where we were, one of the turbofans that had gone in and blown up and spun around. And it spun around in such a way that, like, if the jet is facing this way with the nose cone and the turbofans, it had spun around, it was backwards. So I could see the turbofan. And again, nothing else looks like the turbofan to an engine. And then also, I did talk about this on the one podcast. There were like untold, it looked like millions, but just an untold amount of like shredded pieces of what I would call like airplane skin confetti. And I didn't know this. Somebody out there watching this works on aircraft, but like aircraft skin is extremely thin aluminum. And then it's got a backer on it. And that backer is made of some sort of like hard foam. Almost looks like honeycomb. It almost looks like a graham cracker with like little holes in it. And there were millions and millions and millions and millions of pieces of this shit everywhere. Like most of them were about the size of like the tip of your thumb. Some of them would be the size of a few fingers. Some would be the size of the hand. And the biggest one I ever saw was maybe the size of a man's arm, where it's the torn up airplane skin. And then it's got this like foam hard backer behind it. And like millions and millions and millions and millions of them spread across a big littered plane. And then I don't know how much fuel is inside of a jet, but when that thing hit, I think a lot of people don't know this. The plane hit a little short of the aperture, and it didn't bounce up like this. It hit and then went in. My guess is like it hit and then sort of self-destructed and then went into the building, busted the hole in, and continued to carry it in, because in the E-wing, it penetrated just through to like a tiny hole. It penetrated all the way through these wings. Boom, 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 boom. And then the E-hole, the E-wing, it just penetrated in a hole that was like 3 foot by 3 foot, right? So they ended up scooping that out, and they tried to suppress this fire with water. But again, to my point, jet planes are full of, I don't know how many pounds of fuel. Some ungodly amount of jet fuel, right? Like thousands on thousands of gallons. All of that jet fuel caught fire. And all of that jet fuel splashed all over the place, and that caught fire in this whole building. So you've got a massive, massive, massive fire burning inside of this highly flammable building. And there was no way to put it out. And they ended up dousing the whole place. There was a million fire trucks there. They're pouring tons and tons and tons of water in here. But in the end, I know the way that they figured out how to stop it was they went to E-wing, and that little tiny 3 foot by 3 foot hole, they jackhammered it out till it was like 12 foot by 12 foot. And then they put these massive like industrial fans in there, like these fans that were like 10 foot tall. So they put fans in each wing, and they ended up kind of, I don't know how they did it, but like they introduced a ton of air ventilation. And I guess that between that and then cooling it off, like it somehow suppressed the fire. But I know that they didn't use like fire suppressant foam. It was water, because everything was soaked. Everything, like every wing you went into was like ankle to knee deep in water. And yeah, it was, even in all my years in war, I never saw devastation like that. Like a plane, a very large jet plane hit that building.
Dude, thanks for sharing that story. How did you, understand in your brain that the world had just changed?
I didn't. I was a kid, So we did 28 days on site. Then we cycled back to the barracks. I think it was maybe a week or two. And by that time, I guess things had calmed down a bit because you're talking a little bit over a month. And then we came back and they were doing extremely hardcore site security. Because by this time, everyone in the world wanted to come in and look at the shit. And you had a real problem with like, not news agencies, but just freelance people with telephoto lens cameras showing up like, look, hey, you're down at the beach and there's a fight on the boardwalk. Guess what? You're going to have 50 people out with their phones recording, right? Well, this was like that times a million, but it was before cell phones. So it was people, and they had analog and digital cameras. And that was a big problem. Because whether you agree with it or not, the policy was that people weren't allowed to take photos of this shit, right? So we did site security, and the site security was ran by the U.S. Marshals. So there was a shitload of U.S. Marshals there, and then we went down and we were tasked out and detailed to like assist the U.S. Marshals in site security. And I can remember being in the truck one time. I was at a vehicle control point. I was at some control point. And these two guys were creeping past us in a Ford Explorer. And the one guy had his leg in a cast. And he has his leg up in the passenger. He was in the passenger side with his leg on a cast like this. And what the guy was doing was very cleverly like putting a camera on his cast and taking some photos and then putting the camera down. And we saw him doing this. And we called one of the marshals. And this is my first exposure to U.S. Marshals. I didn't know those dudes are very serious. Those dudes are hitters. Don't f with the Marshals. If you're out there and you don't know about the U.S. Marshals, those dudes get busy. Those dudes are for real, right? This dude comes wailing over in an ATV. Wah! Hits a little bump, jumps, wah! Comes over. He's got the gun rack on the front. Pulls up, skirts in front, like because we stopped the vehicle. He skirts in front of this vehicle, gets out, pulls that on the pistol, reaches in and yokes this dude and yanks him out of the car, right? And the guy's like, my leg. And he's like, your leg is fine, right? And it turned out the guy's leg was fine. He just like had a fake cast. It wasn't even a cast. It was like some fake, I don't know, like paper type thing. But he made it look like he had a cast on his leg. And I just remember this marshal grabbing this dude and yamming him out of the vehicle, slamming on the ground. He took this dude's camera and smashed it, right? And it was a big telephoto lens. Like, I know those lenses cost a lot of money.
Thousands
of dollars. He took this thing and smashed in front of this dude and he let him go. So get the fuck out of here. Like, yeah, those marshals do not play, dude. Yeah.
I got a lot.
Shout outs to the U.S. Marshals.
I got a lot of U.S. Marshal stories. So, like, at what point did you realize, like, hey, man, I'm in the old guard. Like, this unit's not going to deploy and the country's going to war. Like, when did all that start hitting?
Excuse me. Immediately after we got home from the second little pull. And this is a cool story. I guess we'll tell this in my lore. I had a first sergeant and a platoon sergeant who both had Ranger tabs. And they had both jumped in Panama. But my first sergeant had been an RI for many years.
That's a Ranger instructor for all
a Ranger instructor at Ranger School. He had been a jungle warfare instructor at the Jungle Warfare School, which no longer exists. And he spent something like 18 years in LURS, right? Long range surveillance and reconnaissance, right? So he was like an old school jungle NCO, like from the 80s, the kind they don't make anymore, right? Like drive on rags and painted up face and knife in the teeth and sneaking through the jungle. Like, you know, he's a throwback to like the post-Vietnam era type guys. And his name was Rob Brown. And Rob Brown was universally feared by the senior NCOs and the officers in the company, feared by the NCOs in the company, and the men, the junior enlisted guys, worshipped and adored him. He was a frightening individual, an intimidating individual, and he was a soldier's soldier. And, excuse me, for some reason, Rob Brown was friendly with me because he knew I was from Maryland. And he was from Maryland, and he was a real Marylander who played lacrosse growing up, right? So I guess when I got to the company, he like looked up he saw Baltimore, and like he was like, hey, McCoy's, like, you're from Maryland? He's like, oh, I'm from Salisbury or whatever. And I remember him being out in the quad with a lacrosse stick in one hand and a beer in the other, and like flipping a lacrosse ball against the wall and catching it. Like he was a real Marylander, right? So he was always, you know, it's not like I was buddies with my first sergeant, but he knew who I was, and he had a friendly sort of like fatherly uncle vibe to the junior enlisted. But if you were an NCO in that company, you better watch out. He was a demon, right? And so I thought about this a lot, and this is a pivotal moment in my life. I can remember this very clearly. This is one of the pivotal moments in the course of my life. Thought about this, and I took a big breath. Yeah, the Pentagon thing had all blown over. We're back to normal life, right? Thought about this, went down, and I went down to the command hallway, knocked on First Sergeant's door. He's like, yeah. I was like, hey, First Sergeant, it's Private McCoy. And what do you want? I was like, I was wondering if I could get a word with you, First Sergeant. He's like, all right, come in. Come in. He's like, what do you want? And I, you know, parade rest, whatever. Hey, First Sergeant, I've thought about this a lot. I love this unit. This is a great unit. But I want to go and get in the war, and I want to go to regiment. You know, it's no offense against you. It's no offense against the guys. But I really want to go to regiment, and I want to fight. And I remember him coming around the desk and sitting on his desk and just staring at me with that glare, you know what I mean? That old First Sergeant stare. And I got real quiet, and he goes, shut the door. And I was like, oh, man, this is... And looking back on it, I think, you know, it was very, very out of protocol to like skip chain of command and go talk to your First Sergeant. And looking back on it, it was a pretty stupid thing to do.
It probably still is.
Right. Yeah. If you're out there and you're a junior enlisted guy, don't do that shit. But I think he kind of admired my pluck. I think he did. And he came around and he just sat on he sat on his desk and he just stared at me. And he was like, you want to go to regiment, huh? I was like, yeah, Roger, First Sergeant. You want to fight? I was like, Roger, First Sergeant. That's what I'm doing. I want to go and I want to get into the war. And he just said, I can remember this almost verbatim. He goes, all right, I'll get you down there. I'll make a couple phone calls. He's like, but I'll tell you one thing. He's like, I'm not going to have you go down there and fail and make me look like a... He's like, you're going to go down there and you be ready. Now get out of here. And that was it. Get out of here. I was like, okay. Scurried out, right? And he had been an RI. So he knew what was up, right? So this is somewhat pre-internet, right? This is still like mixed pre-internet and analog days. He went up and he printed up a sheet. He had a sign-in sheet that he printed up. And on the sheet, it had every day of the week, Monday through Friday, had an in and an out box on it. And he came out and he showed me this sheet. And it was a couple days later. He's like, all right, check this out. I made a phone call. You got a date, yada, yada, yada. We went through, I remember going to a little conference room and having a phone call with DeBusk. Anybody from 275, you guys remember Sergeant DeBusk? He was a liaison down at RHC at the time. He knew a guy down at RHC from his years in the military. He's like, I made a couple phone calls. It got me on the phone with this guy.
RHC was the regimental headquarters?
Yeah, RHC, yeah. RHQ. And they got me a date. And the date was like 8 months away or something like that. He's like, all right, check this out. He's like, I got this chart here. He's like, so at Fort Myer, the U.S. Army 10-mile team was there, is where they're stationed, right? And they get up and they're on their own protocol. Their whole job is to do distance running, right? And they're all former collegiate runners and triathletes and all this other kind of shit. The Army's like, just like the Army has the AMU, they have all these teams, the skydiving team. Well, this is the Army 10-mile team, right? So he's like, check this out. This is what you're going to do. Every morning, you're going to get up and you're going to go down the street and you're going to train with the Army 10-mile team at 04. And when you're done training with the 10-mile team, I don't care how well you do. I don't care where you finish. You're going to finish there. Then you're going to come back here and you're going to do PT with your unit. And then at the end of the day, and he showed me the chart, he's like, every day, one NCO from this company is going to take you and you're either going to lift or you're going to swim or you're going to ruck. And he's like, and when they're done, they're going to sign this little box. And I'm telling you what, if I don't see signatures in this box, I'm not going to punish you. I'm going to them up. He's like, now get after it. And I thought I was going to do some cool ranger training with Sergeant Brown. I was going to be crawling around in the bush or painting my face or like doing hand and arm signals and shit. It had nothing to do with that. I just went into the most intense PT thing that existed from day one. So I'm getting crushed all day long. And this guy was so clever because, like, if he told the junior NCOs had to take an hour of their time every day to go do fitness with me. And they didn't like that, right? If you get off at 1600 and I'm like, hey, Schuler, guess what? Go take Private McCoy down to the gym for an hour. I'm gonna smash you. You're like, you don't want to do that, right? So every day I'm with kind of a pissed off NCO. So I'm getting pushed harder and harder and harder and harder. And this guy knew exactly what he was doing. This First Sergeant Brown knew exactly what he was doing. When I went to Indoc 8 months later, I was in incredible physical shape. And physically, I was very well prepared for what came. Mentally, no one can be prepared, but physically, I was very prepared. So shout outs to First Sergeant Rob Brown. Thank you. He knew what he was doing. And if he has ever listened to this, hey, First Sergeant, I made it.
How did you mentally handle that? Like 8 months of like 3 workout sessions a day.
Well, you know what? Like I know exactly how I handled it. I was so driven and so deeply motivated that I can remember waking up, opening my eyes and sitting up and thinking the other guy is already out on the road running right now. Or I can remember being under that ruck and I can remember going around the Lincoln Monument with my ruck on and dawn, the sun's still coming up with the ruck on. I'm thinking like, you know what? The other guy was already out on the road before me. The other guy's been lifting ever since he was in middle school. The other guy's bigger than me. The other guy's stronger than me. I have to go farther because I was battling this imaginary person that didn't even exist. And I was terrified that I wasn't going to work hard enough to get there.
You had a pathological need to excel. Break that down for me, dude.
It comes from being around losers my whole life. I didn't have a pathological need to excel. I had a pathological need to never be like those people that I grew up around. You know what I mean? That's why to this day I'm a super neat, orderly, clean, tidy person, because I grew up in this disgusting, filthy, grotesque, dirty house. You know what I mean? That's why I'm repulsed by low effort people. Low effort people disgust me. And it sounds terrible, but that's the truth, right? I grew up around low effort, ignorant people who never had a desire to excel at anything. And it's not so much that I'm going to excel and shove it in your face. I'm tired. I'm terrified of being like one of them. I'm terrified of even being anywhere near something that they could conceptualize. And I don't want to say it was easy. None of this shit is easy. Like, regiment guys, if you're listening, no, it wasn't easy. It sucked, but it was easy to stay motivated. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You're in the pre-Ranger indoctrination program with hundreds of guys in huge barracks. What was that atmosphere like?
We don't have to go into this too much, but I'm not really sure how it's broken down now, but at the time, I went to RIP before it was RASP, and we had a thing called pre-RIP. And there's hundreds of guys in pre-RIP, right? I don't know how many it was, but it was like 300 or 400 guys. And pre-RIP is pretty simple. You're just doing fitness all day long, and at the end of the week, you have a fitness test and a ruck. And pre-RIP at the time is designed to figure out who's really for real about going through this shit and who's just down here faking it because they think it'll be fun adventure or some Call of Duty bullshit, or some guys are like, I think I'll give this Ranger thing a try. No, it's not like that. They want to find out who's for real, who the is for real about it. So the fitness, you were getting smoked a little bit, but the fitness test and the working out every day and the little road marches and stuff, that kind of separated the wheat from the chaff. Like, this is how we're going to find out if you really want to be here or not. And I don't know how many guys it was, several hundred guys, but we cut that down to I think it was 180 in my class.
You graduated 28.
Yeah.
Out of 180.
Yeah.
You knew early you'd make it. What was the moment?
I think the moment I knew I was going to make it wasn't, I didn't know early. I think the moment that I knew I was going to make it was when we did combat soccer. Shout outs to any OG GWAT Rangers, if you remember combat soccer, which was like this crazy game that they play where it's just a big fight out on a field. It's like an excuse to like, hey, we don't know what to do with you guys today, so just go fight under the auspices of playing soccer. But I knew that like, this sounds terrible, but like, I think anybody who serves in regiments spiritually knows they're going to make it, because I just knew it didn't matter what was going to happen to me. I didn't care if a bone was going to stick out of my leg. I didn't care if I was going to drown. I didn't care what was going to happen. I knew that I was never going to quit. And I was pretty sure that I was physically fit enough to make it. I just knew that like, no matter how bad it would get, they could never make it bad enough that I would quit. Like the idea of quitting was just like incomprehensible to me. It's not like, oh man, that was a real rough one, maybe I'll quit. Oh, I mean, back then they used to put hands on us. I've been smacked up and yelled at and like, dude, none of that mattered. I can make it till it gets dark, bro. They got to feed me at some point. And like, okay, I got yelled, I got smacked up. Guess what? I'm at a Spec Ops Indoc. It's supposed to be like this. Like, yeah, this is like, you know, I want it to be horrific because then it's like real. Like, it was incomprehensible to me that I would quit. The thing I was worried about was like, okay, maybe I could get injured and then have to recycle and then come back and do this shit again at some point. But there was no doubt in my mind. I was in control of, am I going to quit? And I was not ever going to go back as a failure like those losers that I grew up around with.
You got to choose your battalion because you re-enlisted. Why was that unusual?
Well, most guys don't get to choose. I think I was one of 2 or 3 guys that got to choose. And I hate hot weather. I do not like hot weather. And I remember very clearly, like a couple days before we graduated, we went on a run, and there was like a temperature and barometer thing in the hallway, in the command hallway, and I remember seeing it, and it was 4 a.m. and 94 degrees and 94% humidity, like straight steamy. 94 degrees, 4 a.m. It's still dark out. And we went for this long run, and I just remember running in that Georgia swamp weather and thinking, there's no way I'm going to spend 4+ years in this hot weather. And that's when I knew I was going to second bat. And I was also like, oh, there's a cool cosmopolitan city nearby. I love the cool weather. I like the cool rainy weather. Second bat's where I'm going to go.
You arrived at 2nd Ranger Battalion with 2 RCOMs, triple stacked badges, looking good. How'd that first day go?
Yeah, I showed up. I was an untabbed Spec 4 with an EIB, airborne and air assault, and I only had 1 RCOM at the time. But you know, I had RCOM, AM, GC.
Which those were hard to get pre-GWAT, man. Like, you didn't just get awards; they didn't hand them out.
Well, I'd been Soldier of the Quarter, and then they gave me another RCOM for a thing that happened on a ceremony. Like, I got my RCOM for doing something cool at a burial ceremony. I didn't get it for like, you know what I mean. But I had an RCOM because I was the most squared away private, right? And I got to my unit, and one of the first things anyone said to me was like, "What is that? What the F is that air assault badge you're wearing?" I was like, "Oh, I went to air assault," and they were like, "Take that shit off. We don't wear that shit here. You're private. You don't wear that shit." And then they just commenced to hazing the shit out of me for, I don't even know. Like, anyone who's been new to regiment, that's what happens. Like, you get to regiment and it gets very serious. Very, like, you've had other Rangers on the program, and I don't need to explain it to them, but to the layperson who's out here listening to this, maybe while you're driving to work, maybe while you're in the gym, I'm going to tell you something right now. Ranger Regiment, it is not a game there, bro. It's not a joke. It's not like we're here to look cool. It's the most serious job, because that job results oftentimes in the death of the people that execute the job, and certainly in the death of the belligerents of our enemy, of our country. It is the most serious job that exists, and the stakes are extraordinarily high. If you serve in regiment long enough, one of your friends is going to get killed, you're going to get injured, and you're probably going to do something terrible to another human being. So when you get there, they want to find out one thing. There's just one thing they want to know about you. Are you a man or are you a punk ass bitch? That's it. That's like the whole science of the whole thing. Are you a man? Are you hard? Are you hard for real? Because every guy thinks they're hard. Somebody's listening to this right now and they're probably on a treadmill with a weight vest on, doing a little CrossFit, and you think you're hard, right? But you're not hard because you don't know if you're hard or not because you've never been tested. This is an environment in which you are tested every single day. Are you hard or are you a punk? Because if you're a punk, you're going to fold up when it gets hard. And I can't have you fold when it gets hard because somebody's going to die. So that's all they want to find out. The second you get there, they start to test. And are you hard or are you a bitch? And that's it.
You got smoked for hours.
Hours.
In your starches, dude.
Hours.
Describe that.
So I came from the honor guard where like we look fantastic, right? Like my stuff, like, look, you know, my uniform back then we wore what was called starch and spits and fluff and buff, right? So we had two sets of uniform for garrison. We had a working uniform and we had a garrison uniform. The garrison uniform has all your accoutrements on it. And it's expected to be starched and clean. And at the time we still had to shine our boots, right? So obviously my starches come in garrison, coming from the honor guard. My stuff looks perfect, right? So, and that's where you wear your beret. Your fluff and buff is your working uniform where you wear like a ball cap or PC. And, you know, I would say it's rumpled, but you're wearing like your working gear, right? So I'm in my starches, I'm upstairs, and I'm getting crushed for hours and hours and hours and hours. Shout out to Kellet Sayre. Thanks, man. Love you, brother. You're one of the greatest soldiers I ever met, but didn't think you needed to do that to me my first day. I'm still kind of holding a grudge about that. So Kellet Sayre is up there destroying me for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. I'm talking hours, right? And they call a COB formation, right? I'm going downstairs. I look like just totally destroyed. I can barely walk, right? I walk downstairs. My uniform is dripping, coated in sweat. My beret is like coated in sweat. I just look awful, right? Limp up to the formation. I've never been smoked like that. Not even a rip. I've never been smoked like that. Like I'm getting smoked for like 6 hours straight, right? So you just don't have anything. I'm standing in formation. And my platoon sergeant is like calls me out in the formations. McCoy, get up here. Why the do you look like a bag of shit, right? Why do you look so effed up? I was like, and then it hit me, that street shit hit me, right? Because the real answer is like, well, because Kellet Sayre just smoked me for like 6 hours. This is why I look like shit. Ask him. And I just remember having that moment where I'm looking at Godek and just the street shit kicked in. I was like, I can either be a bitch and snitch or I can just take it. And I was just like, I don't know, Sergeant. It's my fault. And he's like, all right, we'll deal with that later. Get the back in. And then afterwards, he smoked me. You know what I mean? But I think that was a little bit of a pivotal moment because I knew in that moment, like, are you a bitch? You know what I mean? Are you a bitch and you're going to cry? Are you going to cry? But like, well, I look like a mess because Specialist Sayre was yelling at me and smoking me. Or are you going to be a man? You're just going to take it. You know what I mean? So that was like one of those little blips. You know what I mean?
How did growing up and like having a rough upbringing prepare you for those Ranger politics?
What do you mean by politics?
Well, I mean, there was a lot of, you know, you're going to tell some stories later about just some of the things that happened in the regiment of like, you know, some things you can say, you know, like whether it's your squad leader smoking you and not telling your platoon sergeant or, you know, just all that kind of prison style like
yeah.
politics.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that, look, I was a very average Ranger. I was probably good at a couple things. I was sucked at other things, just like most guys out there, right? But I was always good at the politics. I was always good at navigating the politics. I was a street dude. I came from a street background. I came from a rough background. And like, I never had a problem navigating the interpersonal politics. I was one of the party guys. I was one of the dudes that knew where the girls were. I was one of the dudes that always knew where the party was. Osher, you were in the military. There's a lot of freaks and geeks and weirdos in the military, right?
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of dudes that just sit in their barracks room and they, right? But the regiment is the ultimate jock culture. It's the ultimate locker room. I hate using the term alpha male. Let's just say it's the ultimate jock culture. And you can't be like a weirdo in a jock culture, right? And I was very well attuned to that. You know, like I played collegiate and semi-pro rugby. You know, like I worked blue collar, like as a carpenter beforehand. I played sports. Like I wouldn't call myself a jock, but I had the jock mentality. And I was cool, and I was a little bit older than other Rangers, and I knew where like the party was, and I had girls around me. So I never had problems navigating the political part of it. Like I was always like, I felt like politically I was landing where I was supposed to be. You know what I mean? If you take away the guns and the bullshit and the smoking and all that stuff, just the male culture, the male Eden culture, I fit in very, very well with that. The unvarnished, self-correcting, you know, meritocracy, I fit right in.
Winter Strike 2003. JSOC's idea to show the Taliban and Al Qaeda the mountains were safe in the winter.
That was a good idea, all right.
Whose brilliant idea was that?
Well, it sure as wasn't mine. So Winter Strike is part of the 275 lore, and like, look, the war has gone on for a long time, and a lot better Rangers than me have done a lot cooler shit. But in my time, a lot of that stuff, like the Merrill era and Syria and all those things, hadn't happened yet, right? So for you young Rangers out there, you guys who were doing Merrill era and you guys were doing Syria and stuff, shout out to you guys. You guys were out there kicking ass and up, right? But in my time, that hadn't happened yet, right? So very early in Afghanistan, somebody way up in JSOC was like, hey, man, you know what? These Taliban dudes, they keep running up into the northern recesses of Afghanistan since the time of Alexander, right? And they rest and refit. And they hide up there, and the country's just too hard to get into. So we need a group of very physically fit, very motivated, tough guys to go up there and chase them around up in those mountains. And we're going to show them anywhere you can go, we can strike you. So why don't we get some Rangers to go up there and hump up around in those mountains, and we're going to put the hammer on the Taliban and let them know you can't run and hide from us. So in our lore, they took, and we did a quick little pump up there. It was only a few months, I think 3 months. I don't know how long it was, but it was a few months. We went up there and we humped our asses off up in those mountains. And did Kosteka do that one?
I don't think so.
Yeah, that was early in the lore, but it was known as Winter Strike. It was a very, very difficult part. It was the most physically demanding deployment, arguably, the regiment's ever done. Physically, I'm just talking about physically demanding, right? As far as the distances that we covered on foot, the amount of times that we were out there. And we were basically really just doing Ranger school in the Afghani mountains for long, long periods of time. I think we did a 28-day. It's some ridiculous.
Yeah,
amount.
you told me you guys were pulling water out of the streams.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can remember like laying in a PB in my sleeping bag with the bivvy on it, the Gore-Tex bivvy, shutting the bivvy, and then waking up and opening the bivvy, and then snow falling in because it had snowed on me, and then sitting up. Now I'm waist deep in snow. So it was extremely difficult. We crossed
a PB is a patrol base.
A patrol base, yeah.
Where you guys rest.
A PB is known as a patrol base. For you Rangers out there, it's a punk bunk. It's a PB because your ass is getting punked when you're in the punk bunk. But we crossed 16,000 foot. We crossed 14,000 foot many times. We were above the timberline. Everyone was sick. Everyone was altitude sick. Everyone had ketolactic acidosis. Bunch of guys had, what's it called where you get the uncontrollable shits? Everyone was sick. Everyone was mountain sick, right? And it wasn't kinetic at all. We found a bunch of things. We kicked some doors in. We recovered a bunch of munitions and blew them up. One of the highlights of that one was like we somehow acquired a huge stockpile of these odd-shaped Chi-Com, like 83 millimeter mortars, because their mortars are different than ours. We had some big stockpile of like something like 200 of these things. We found these things in a village, and then we used goats to strap these mortars up and carry them up the village into a hillside. And then we guarded this shit for like 3 days, and then naval EOD flew out on a helicopter and blew up the stuff. And that's the second biggest explosion I've ever seen. It was a big stockpile of 83 millimeter mortars, huge explosion. The vapor wave goes off, destroys a bridge. But yeah, mostly what we, I've slept in caves. I've slept in Afghan villa huts, and just a lot of sleeping in the earth and walking and walking and walking and walking.
You said that deployment wasn't very kinetic, but you guys lost Jay Blessing to an IED.
We did, yeah.
Jay was your company armor, first person to put a rifle in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
What did that feel like, bro?
I think it was the first time the adventure of soldiering got real, I wasn't good friends with Blessing. I knew him. He was very well liked. He's a good dude. He's a rap fan. I remember that. It was kind of unusual, right? But he was the first guy to put a rifle into my hands. I think it was the second or third day I was in battalion. I went down to the arms room, and they were issuing me my weapon. I can very clearly remember Jason taking the rifle and putting it into my hands, right? And that's a big deal. My Ranger rifle, this is my rifle. This isn't a rifle. This is my rifle. I'm in Ranger Regiment. This guy put this rifle into my hands, right? It's a big moment for me. And he was killed. The news came over the net, and I think everyone was in shock, because I just it didn't devastate me because I didn't know him that well, but I think the reality of it just kind of came hitting like, wow, this is for real. This is not like some adventure that we're on out in the mountains. We're not just up here like walking around and looking cool with our cool guns.
You came home from that deployment with your CIB. Your platoon sergeant threw it on the desk.
Yeah.
Describe that moment.
Eric Godick, if you're out there listening, 2-5, to this day, I have the utmost respect for and profound sense of love for that guy. My first platoon sergeant was somebody that I really deeply cared for and admired. Stay in contact with him to this day. Somebody's very well known in the regiment. Went from 175 to 275, and then unfortunately was one of the people who was in the aftermath of the Tillman incident. So he left 275. But shout outs to Eric Godick. Thank you for being the role model and the kind of NCO that you were. One of the foundational people in my soldiering experience. But I remember he was very sarcastic. He was very dry. He cared about his men very much. He could be cruel, just like anyone else could. But I remember him calling him out with Mike Anderson. He's like, Anderson, McCoy, come in here. He'd come in there. He always had a huge lip in, like he's got a big yacker of grizzly. And he's like, hey, these came in. And he threw the metal, the metal ones.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have them sewn on. He threw the metal ones, and he's like, hey, put those on your uniform. Get them sewn on as soon as possible. He's like, if I see you without that shit on your uniform, I'm going to kill you. Now get the out of my office. And we walked out, and I had my CIB, and I just couldn't believe it. I was like,
can you explain to the listeners who aren't infantry or aren't military what a CIB is?
The CIB is the Combat Infantryman's Badge. It's only given to soft guys. It's only given to 11 series. It's only given to 18 series. And it's the pinnacle crowning achievement of being an infantryman. It means that you've been under direct fire and you've been in direct conflict with the enemy. And it's kind of like, like it's so common in regiment. We don't really like think about it that way, but it's like the locus of focus for any infantryman who's ever existed. It means that you've done the actual description of your job in conflict with the enemy. And there's a lot of controversy about it. Some people get them who don't deserve them. Some people don't get them who do deserve them. But to be a regiment, and it also means for us, you can wear the patch of the unit in which you've been deployed in, right? So if you're in regiment, you wear your scroll and tab on one shoulder. But if you've been to combat with the regiment, now that means you get to wear your scroll on both shoulders. And as silly as that sounds, that's a big thing with us. That means that you've deployed with us. You're one of us. You know what I mean? You're now vetted in the family. And regiment yes, the CIB is important, but it's kind of like if you've been deployed to combat with the regiment, you're now like if you get the tab and you've been to combat with the regiment, you're now kind of like a fully fledged member of the Ranger family.
Holding that CIB privately in your room like an infantry stone, what did it represent to you?
I knew I had made it, but at that time I didn't have my Ranger tab, and that was on such a pinnacle. You know, I had to get my Ranger tab. How to get my Ranger tab? How to get my Ranger tab? I think in any other unit I would have like felt like I had made it, but I felt like I felt at the time it was just another step, and there was still a lot to be accomplished. I knew that my Uncle Andy would be proud of me, though.
Yeah, you felt Uncle Andy's presence during training. Did you feel him during combat?
No, not all. No offense to him, but not at all. I just felt like he was the locus who got me there. But when in combat, like I wasn't very kinetic in Afghanistan. Iraq was extremely kinetic. I've been in heavy combat in Iraq, but like I didn't feel his presence there. I feel like that's when I was on my own wave and I was on my own path. You know what I mean? My biggest regret is that I didn't see him before he died. But I was, you know, he died when I was he died, I believe, when I was in. He died when I was still a rookie infantryman out at 275. He was a very, very old man. So I never got to sit down and have the conversation with him, which I regret to this day. But you know, if there is an afterlife, if there is something out there, you know, yeah.
We're gonna go on this next chapter, and this is gonna be a big one. So before that, let's take a break just for a sec.
We're back.
Yeah, man. So coming back from the break, we're going to transition a little bit. Still your time at 275, but we're going to talk about kind of a larger than life figure, especially during those times. I don't hear him spoke about as much. But Pat Tillman, can you explain to the audience, you know, kind of like who Pat Tillman was, and then maybe kind of how him and Kevin ended up in the regiment?
So I want to preface this by saying not only did I serve along Tillman, I was technically in his first fire team. I was friends with him. His brother and I were on a machine gun team together for a long time. And in case you don't know, when you're on a machine gun team together, it means you're within arm's length proximity of your partner for all day long, every day. So his brother and I, same age, got along great since day one, and his brother and I have stayed in touch all these years. And it's very important to me that I say that me coming and talking about Pat publicly definitely comes with the blessing of his brother. Because if, you know, I approached Kevin before this and was like, hey man, I'm going to go on a podcast. I'm going to be talking about P. Like, are you cool with it? And, you know, Kevin and I have a good relationship, and like, you know, he knows how I felt about him, and he knows the content I'm going to talk about him. So this definitely comes with Kevin's blessing. And to me, that's very important that I say that on the record. And then afterwards, when this media hits social, I want Kevin to hear this little part right here. So shout out to Kevin. And look, man, we love your brother. So all good things.
So can you just kind of tell our listeners like a little bit about Pat Tillman who may not know him? Because I mean, we're getting older now.
So for those of you who may not know, anyone who's listening to this who has a soldiering background obviously knows what Pat Tillman was. But for those of you who don't know, Pat Tillman was a NFL All-Star. He was an NFL All-Pro safety for the Cardinals. And after 9/11 happened, he and his brother Kevin, who was a minor league baseball player, also a professional athlete, decided to quit what they were doing with sports and join the Ranger Regiment and get into the fight.
And at that time in our country, that was unheard of.
Unheard of. I mean, it's never been happened since. Yeah. The last athletes that went, he's the only athlete in American history he's the only professional athlete in American history to volunteer to go to war. We've had lots of professional athletes serve in war before him in the Korean, Vietnam, and World War II, but they were drafted. Pat Tillman is the first professional athlete in the Big Four and the last to voluntarily give up his $1 million
contracts.
Yeah, he was a millionaire to come and serve in the Ranger Regiment. And I had the great fortune to serve in his platoon and, for a very short period of time in his team.
Pat was in Ranger School during your first deployment. When did you first meet him?
Well, I met him before that, right? When I met him, the first time I met him was on my first day in regiment. And, the lore of Pat Tillman didn't exist then. Mm-hmm. He was just the guy who came from the NFL, right? So they were like, hey, that guy Tillman's going to be upstairs. Don't talk. This was the brief I got. Hey, that guy Tillman is in your platoon. Don't talk to him about football. All right, cool, whatever. And I went upstairs, and I can remember the first time seeing him. Go upstairs. He's with Jason Parsons, and him and Jason Parsons were arguing about something. Parsons and I had been in basic training together, so I knew Parsons a little bit. By the time I got there, Parsons was a specialist with his Ranger tab, so he was a junior NCO, because in the Ranger Regiment, if you have your tab, you're basically a junior NCO. And him and Parsons were arguing about something. I kind of came up and was like, oh, that's that Tillman guy. That dude's big. He's a big dude. He wasn't super tall. I want to say maybe he was 5'10", 5'11", but he had huge neck, hands. He was just brolic as shit. Like, he was just more, it wasn't just muscles. Like, his hands were bigger. His neck was bigger. His head was bigger. He was just like, I don't think, I think it's very important that people out there understand that, like, I don't care how hard you work out or how disciplined you are or how stoic you are or what supplements you take or what tea you're on. Like, you only get to the NFL or the NBA or the MLB or the NHL if you're a genetic lottery winner. Like, those dudes, like, I don't care how much you lift. I don't care how much what your big three lift is. I don't care how fast you run. Those dudes are made of different stuff than you are. And being around Pat was my first time being around someone like that. So I was very fortunate enough to not only become friends with him, but I got to see him do a lot of weird shit over time that, like, made me realize, like, the disparity between, like, a high level professional athlete and a regular person.
How long had he been in the regiment before you got there?
Couple months. He was a new guy. I was a new guy. He was a new guy. I was a slightly less new guy. I'm sorry. I was a new guy. He was a slightly less new guy.
Yeah. What was your first impressions of Pat Tillman, the person, not the NFL player?
He was cool. I got along great with him. His brother was a little more reserved. Pat was like a outspoken, hyper confident big dude. He was a hyper confident alpha male in the locker room jock world of Ranger Regiment. But the thing is, he came from the ultimate locker room jock world of the NFL. And in the NFL, he was one of the dogs. So he's super confident, really, really friendly, but he had a super blunt, direct way of talking that was, I think, could be a little off-putting to people at first. But I was impressed by how intelligent he was. He's super, super, super intelligent.
I remember you said that Pat was, really selective about how he, who he was boys with. What did he look for in people, you think?
I know, well, for one, he liked people that were well-read. And going back, that seems to be a theme in my life. Like, I was extremely well-read. I remember very early on, we had a conversation about Kafka, about Franz Kafka and Metamorphosis. And he was very impressed that I had read Kafka. But more than anything, I think Pat wanted people that you could have an intelligent conversation with. He didn't give a shit like how badass you were or what your attitude was or any of this other kind of stuff. Like, if you think about it, he was the ultimate alpha male badass with all the money and all this other kind of stuff. He didn't care about that stuff. He wanted people that he could have an intelligent human conversation with. And to be honest with you, and like Asher, you know this, and a lot of people out there know that, a lot of guys in the military don't have that sort of social skill. It's definitely more prevalent in regiment because you got a lot of hyper confident, fit guys. But like he just wanted to find somebody that could challenge him intellectually. He was very interested in he was always interested in what your thoughts were on something. He's a super, super, super intelligent guy.
Kevin Tillman became your machine gun partner. How did that relationship develop?
From the moment Kevin and I met each other, we got along. Kevin and I are the same age. And we actually have very, very similar personalities. we fell out of touch for a long time after Pat's death. And then we caught up a long time ago and then fell out of touch again. Kind of rekindled our friendship recently. And it's kind of funny. Like, Kevin and I have very, very, very similar personalities, very similar senses of humor. And we just got along fantastically well. Kevin had been a minor league baseball player. So he was a professional athlete as well. I believe Kevin went to Stanford, super well educated. And just like his brother, really cared about the character of someone's content, the content to someone's character. And I think that's what separated them from most Rangers. And again, like Kevin and I we just got along like peanut butter and jelly, man, from the minute we met each other.
Because you and Kevin were tight, Pat let you kind of into that inner circle. How did that feel?
There was no like feeling about it, but Pat was definitely kind of picky about who he fucked with. Who he associated with. He was very outspoken on who he thought was intelligent, who he thought was, and him and Kevin are extremely close. We're extremely close. And because it's not just that I was Kevin's AG, his assistant gunner, but it's the fact that Kevin and I got along so well is the reason I think Pat was like, all right, you're cool. You know what I mean? Like he was pretty picky about who he was cool with. And I was just very fortunate enough to be cool. Because you know why? Because I'm cool, right?
Yeah. That's why I brought you on this podcast. I'm just kidding. You called Pat, I know when we were prepping, one of the things that like really stuck is you called Pat a genetic mutant, not made of the same stuff as regular humans. 100%. Can you give me like give us a couple examples?
So I've seen him do things that are not normal. If you're out there and you're from a soft unit and you're listening to this, you know that about every company of every 150 so-ish guys has a guy that's like uniquely non-humanly talented, right? He runs faster, he jumps higher, whatever. And a lot of those guys aggregate into Ranger Regiment. So you get the most athletic, the biggest guys, the strongest guys, the guys that can run the farthest. And then every now and then, some guy comes along who's a mutant, like who's just his physical ability to do things is a borderline incomprehensible. And I had never, and for a lot of you out there listening, you like, no offense, you might have not ever met someone like this in your life, unless maybe you were around high level Division I athletics or professional sports. But like, I certainly had never been around someone who was like a human mutant, right? Until I was around Pat. And then it kind of took me a while to like realize like, oh shit, this dude is not like other dudes. Like, I mean, think of all the people that want to be in the NFL, right? If it came down to just who worked out the most, there'd be a lot of different guys in the NFL. But like, he was born with a physical tool set that's kind of hard to describe. The first time, and this stuck in my memory, the first time I saw it, there's a fond memory I have of him. I was on CQ. I was on duty. If you're from the Marines or the Navy, you call it duty. The Army, we call it CQ. So I'm on CQ. I'm in my duty uniform.
Basically, for those of you who don't know what CQ is, you're basically, every company has a CQ. There's a battalion CQ. It's basically called charge of quarters. You're on duty for like 24 hours. You gotta man the phone. Anybody who walks into the company. So it's a 24-hour.
Right. And you're in your duty uniform and you're looking right and you're sitting at a little desk and you're manning the phone and you're basically the face of the business for that 24 hours. So I'm on CQ. And at that time, the barracks were set up in a quad formation. So we had 4 barracks with a lawn in the middle, sort of like a collegiate dorms with a quad in the middle. And the guys are out in the quad and they're playing Frisbee. And the Frisbee and Ranger Regiment basically turns into like a big fight. Like whoever catches the Frisbee gets beat up. But like all the guys are out there. And Rangers, we wear different PT outfits, right? We wear super tight T-shirts and super short booty shorts, and we wear all black, right? Our PT uniforms like look cool. I'm on duty. I'm standing out front. I'm watching the guys play Frisbee, and one of the guys throws the Frisbee up in the air. And you know how you'll see a Frisbee and it'll go way up in the air, and then it'll hang in the air, and then it'll kind of come back down like this. This guy throws the Frisbee up. Frisbee goes up, hangs up in the air, starts to float back down. And there's got to be 20 guys out there playing. and they're all waiting for it. And on cue, everybody jumps to get the Frisbee. So there must have been 8 to 10 arms that go up for this Frisbee, right? And I look and I see 8 to 10 arms like this. Boom, 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 boom. All these arms with tattoos and black shirts. And then one arm, I swear to God, is like this much higher, right? And Pat was jacked as shit. You could see this big, massive, muscly arm. He's like, jumps up, and I can't kind of show it because I'm in the chair, but he like did a little half moon step, and he just jumped up and picked it out of the air like it was nothing. Like he just kind of did the smooth little like half step, turned around, jumped, and backhanded it out of the air and came down like it was nothing. And then he just elbowed Schumann right in the face. Kaboom! Split his shit open. And I remember watching that and thinking to myself, I could never do that. I could practice that little move for 6 months and not be able to do it. And he just did it like off the top of his head, like whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And it was funny. Like I was right before I came down here, I was talking to Kevin and I told him I was going to tell that story and he was laughing. And Kevin said that he used to call him the flea when they were kids because he could jump so high. He could just whoop, like he was a bug. He could just jump. And so that was the first time I saw it, right? I was like, all right, this dude that was weird. Like, and then I remember another time he was getting in an argument with one of the guys, with one of the junior sergeants. And JP is like screaming at Till. Till's got his feet up on a chair and he's doing push-ups. And they're having a full-on argument, like arguing about some shit. And Tillman has his feet up on the chair and he's doing decline push-ups. And he must have done damn near 200 push-ups, just cranking them out like high speed. Bam, bam, bam. Not just bam, 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 bam. And he's full-on yelling at Jay. And they're having a real argument, like a lover's quarrel, right? They're really going at it. And he didn't break cadence in those push-ups. It was just like boop, 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 boop. For the whole thing, he must have done 200 of them. And when he was done, he just got up and he fixed his shirt and he walked out like it was nothing. And I was like how did he do that? And there was another time we were out at Regensburg. So back then we used to have we had like a fake mock-up city out in the wilds of JBLM that only the Rangers were allowed to use. And we were allowed to like shoot simunitions and blanks there and like throw pyro and blow shit up. It was like our little training area. And it was a snowy, wet, shitty, rainy day. There was huge mud puddles all over the place. And Till had just come back from Ranger school. And Godick, shout-outs to 2-5. He goes up to Till and he's like, hey, man, no pressure. But we're going to have you run a team and we're going to have you assault across the street and take out this church. But hey, remember, no pressure, right? Which we both know means...
all the pressure.
right.
Yeah.
Don't this up, right?
Yeah.
So we're on the second floor of this big building, and across the street there's a mock-up church with pews in it. And Godick's like, here's the deal. We're going to set up a support by fire upstairs. We're going to shoot up the church. And when you're ready, you're going to throw the shift. You guys are run across the street, and you're going to take down the church. And hey, remember, no pressure. Right? So Tillman, God love him, is always up to here all the time. And now after hearing Godick say no pressure to him 5 times, he's up to here, right? So the guys are on the second floor in the big bay window, and the support by fire is going. And for those of you who don't know what support by fire is, it means all the machine guns are rocking and rolling. Boom, 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 boom. So there's like 3 big machine guns and 3 small machine guns rocking and rolling inside of this building. You can imagine how loud this is, right? It sounds awesome, right? Do, all this gunfire going off. And we're in the door, and it's me, Danny, and Brian Coons. And Tillman's at the door, and he's wound up to 100. He's all ready. He's like, you guys ready? You guys ready? And we're like, yeah. He's like, all right, follow me, right? And he throws the shift. He throws the signal out into the road for the support by fire to lift. And the doorway we were in was probably about as high as this. It was probably about as high as this countertop here. And it was supposed to have stairs built up to it, but the engineers hadn't gotten around to building stairs up to it. So it's a suspended doorway in the air, and in front of the doorway, there was probably a good 8 to 10 foot huge iced over mud puddle of like knee to ankle deep mud, right? And we're in full kit. Helmet, kit, weapon, everything. And for those of you who don't know, full kit can be anywhere from 25 to 40 pounds. So we got a considerable amount of gear on. And your rifle. Till throws the shift. He's like, come on, let's go. And I can still see it because I was behind him. He just broad jumped, one jump. Just like Michael Jordan from the free throw line, just hung in the air. Jumped across this mud puddle, landed in one stride, and then boom, rocketed off to the other side of the road. And he cleared the road in like 2 seconds. Like, he was gone. And he did this probably at the skill level of, I don't know, an NFL all-pro athlete, right? Yeah. And then Danny takes one step out of this doorway and boom, ass over tea kettle, head first in the puddle. Brian trips over him. I trip over Brian. Now all three of us are in this mud puddle, helmets off, barrels in the muck, like just looking like the Keystone Cops, like a total tragedy, right? Ridiculous. Till is across the street and he's looking at us. He's like, come on. Come on. Come on. He's like getting all wound up. Come on. We're like, oh, I can barely get out of the mud, right? He goes, man. And he goes in the church. He goes in church by himself. Big mistake. And in the church, they've got an OPFOR in there. And it was a guy laying down under one of the pews. And an OC, an observer controller, is in the church. So he goes in, and the observer controller's like, Tillman, you're by yourself. Now you're a casualty. Lay down, you're dead, right? So we finally get out of the mud. We come limping across the road, probably a good minute later. We get the guy in the church. The OC is like, we're covered in mud. And the OC is like, all right, you guys, Tillman's a casualty. You know, take care of the casualty, assess the casualty, reconsolidate his gear, and then move on. And Till, God bless him, he's laying there like this as a casualty, and just a stream of profanity is coming out of his mouth. He's like, I haven't told you guys, I've blah, 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 blah. Danny, and you left me. And like, he's really going off, right? And Danny, to his credit, kneels over me. He's like, yo, Till, shut up, dude. You're dead, right? And we start laughing, and the OC starts laughing. He's like, he's right, Tillman. Like you're dead, right? And we all kind of giggle like that. And Tillman turns purple, right? He's like, yeah. And you could like see the steam coming out of his ears. It looked like the Warner Brothers. And like him and Danny are whispering, and like, you know, we package him up and move on. And like, that was one of a million incidences that I had with him. And I have one story that I had with just him and I that's very near and dear to my heart. And I'll tell that when we get a minute.
Yeah. That's the story when you guys were on CQ. I think it's appropriate, man.
When it was raining.
Yeah.
You want me to tell it?
Yeah, it's great. It was a great story. You told me in the prep, and it was.
I made sure that Kevin knows about this, and Kevin was very happy to hear this story because he was like, "Man, that was so him." I was very fortunate enough to have an incident with just him and I that I hold very near and dear to my heart, where I just got to see him in his most natural human environment. Tillman and I got along very, very well. And for some reason we lifted together, which is kind of a joke because like I was lifting like 3 pounds and he was lifting 900. You know what I mean? Like I used to joke that it was like more work for me to like move his weights around than the actual workout. But he was brolic as he had the biggest quads you've ever seen, the biggest neck you've ever seen. He was jacked beyond belief. One night we're on CQ. We're on CQ and it's the middle of the night, and I think it's a 4-day weekend, and the barracks are a ghost town. No one's around. It's totally, totally empty. It might have even been block leave. I don't remember, but we're in the barracks and it's completely, completely empty in the barracks. It's just me and T. It's just me and Tilly, and it's pouring down rain. 275 Seattle area. It is like really pouring down rain outside. And I remember very clearly, Kosteka will probably remember this. For some reason, there was a gigantic Ralph Lauren polo golf umbrella at the CQ desk. And that kind of becomes a player in the story, right? So I'm sitting at the CQ desk, I'm watching TV or whatever. And Tillman comes trotting down the stairs. And he's in his PTs. He's like, hey, man, check it out. And he had an old school analog coach's watch, like a 60 minutes timer. Tick, 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 tick. You know, you click it. I don't know where he got this thing, but he's pretty proud of it, right? And he's like a total jock. Of course he would have one of these things, right? He's like, check this out. And he's like showing it to me, and it's like he's showing me how to work it. He's like, hey, man, I need you to come outside of the back 40 with me. So we go out back, and I'm under the eave, and I got this massive polo umbrella. Like, it's a golf umbrella that's big enough for like 2 guys to stand under, right? So I'm standing there, and I'm in my starches. I'm in my nice duty uniform, and he's in PTs. I'm standing there with the umbrella, and he's showing me how this watch works. And there's no cars in the parking lot. Street lights are on, and it is pouring huge fat drops of water. It's pouring, it's cold out. And he's pointing across the parking lot. He's like, hey, check it out. He's like, he had walked off like the distances between the parking lines, and he knew exactly how far like 40 or 100 yards was or something like that. He goes, hey, man, I'm going to go down and line up at one of the lines. And when you're ready, you say go and hit the timer, and then I'll run. And then when I run past you on this line, you hit the timer and you time me. I'm like, all right, cool. Weird, but whatever. Guys do all manner of weird shit in regiment, like whatever. So he walks down. He's like, you ready? I'm like, yeah, Till, I'm ready. He's like, all right, I'm getting ready, right? And he gets in a 3-point stance. He's like, when you're ready, say go. So I'm like, all right, go. And I go. And he takes off max effort, like everything he has. Everything he has. Professional NFL athlete, quads, the muscles. He's just hauling ass. And he goes by on time. He comes over to me. He's like, this guy's hands on his hips. He's like, what was my time? I was like, I don't know. It was whatever time. He's like, all right, it's not good. I got to do it again. So he goes back down. I can see this like so clearly in my memory. He's like, are you ready? Like, yeah, Till. He's like, all right, let me know. It's like, all right, go. Same thing. Max effort. Comes by, click. Walks up to me. He's like, what's my time, bro? And I tell him, and like he gets pissy with me. He's like, are you sure? Are you sure that's the time? Because I know my body, dude, and I'm not that, slow, blah, blah, blah. And we get into it like a little bit, like friendly, like boys. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, this isn't the combine, dude. We're not at the NFL combine. We're in the back 40. It's pouring down rain. It's Sunday night. What are you doing, dude? You know what I mean? I'm not an NFL coach. Like, you're just some dude running around in this, and he's soaked by this point. He's like, all right, you're right. I know, man. So he goes back, and I swear to God, he must have done this 15 times. Max effort every time, and he is smoked by the end of it, right? Like, I don't care who you are. If you run 15 all out, everything you got, 40 to 100 yard sprints, you're going to be tired afterwards, right? If I comes back, he's like, all right, man, take the desk. So I go and I take the desk, and he disappears. He just vanishes. I'm sitting on the desk, and like a bunch of time goes by. I'm like, dude, it's like 3 a.m. Did this dude like bail on me? Like, what happened?
Did you guys at CQ together?
Yeah. I'm like, dude, because CQ lasts from 06 to 06. And it's 3 a.m. I'm like,
that's the hardest part in the morning, dude.
Dude, the last 3 hours, right? That's the worst part of CQ. Anybody vets out here have pulled CQ, that last 3 hours is awful. You're like trying to stay awake. And I'm starting to get pissed off. I'm like, this guy is going to f me over. This guy's going to F me over, and I'm going to pull the rest of the CQ by myself. He's gone for a long time. And then he comes down the stairs again, and he's in a perfect, newly starched uniform, looking great, right? He comes in, he's like, hey, man. He's like, really appreciate you doing that early. He's like, I got the desk for the rest of the night. Don't worry about it. It was like a total, like he hooked it up, right? And like, I was just thinking like, that's like such a bro moment. You know what I mean? And among many other little memories that I have of him, like, you know, we got along great. I've been to Christmas parties with him, know his wife, know his brother. Like, you know, I got along great with him. But like, I was thinking, like, you know, I've worked out with him, been to the gym with him, you know, like, I got to have like a real bro moment with him. You know what I mean? Like,
you mentioned like Pat Tillman was an extremely like intelligent and intellectual person. He had like a really good knowledge of the world. How did his intellect intimidate other Rangers, especially like leadership?
Yeah, you said it exactly right like that. He didn't like give a shit about your rank, which caused a lot of problems. He didn't give a what rank you were. He only cared what you were like because he came from a world of adults. He already came from a world of adults and high performers. So to him, the concept of rank, like, yeah, it made sense, and he acknowledged rank when he had to, but in the long term, he didn't give a shit what your rank was. And if he thought you were a dumbass, he would tell you. You know what I mean? He paid a lot of price for it, and he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because a lot of guys think they're alphas until a real alpha male shows up. Like a real alpha male shows up. And if you're if you're low key insecure or a punk, it like bothers people. It's sort of like if you've been riding a scooter your entire life and then a Ducati pulls up next to you, you're like, oh shit. I've been on a moped, and that's like a different type of thing. You know what I mean? And a lot of guys couldn't handle it. And like politically, he had a lot of problems. Not like you conspiracy theory people out there. We didn't kill him. There was no plot. There was no like, oh, he's going to go into politics. There was none of that. He was a fully fledged member of our platoon family, and we loved him. We loved that dude. We all loved him. And he died in a very terrible accident. And the way that he died could have happened to anybody. It was an accident. And like, there was no like, you know, all this stuff. Like, if you believe any of the conspiracy theories about Tillman, then you're someone who's very easily manipulated by the lowest level of shock journalism media. Like, he mentioned in a couple letters to his wives that the war was illegal, which it was. You know what I mean? It was a crazy war that we fought. But like, he had no designs to be a politician. He had no designs to like, you know, he wasn't killed by the CIA or anything like that. He was our dear friend, and we loved him, and he died in a terrible accident. It's very sad.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a sec. This episode is brought to you by TitansArms.com, your trusted source for research-grade SARMs. These third-party tested compounds are formulated to support research into tissue selective activity, especially in muscle and bone. Titan offers free nationwide shipping, a wide selection in both capsules and droppers, and oversized 90 capsule and 90 ml bottles. Everything is compounded in the USA, raising the bar for quality and reliability. From the lab to your door, Titan delivers transparent data and premium service. That's TitansArms.com, forged by research, not opinions. You had a funny story about his car, bro. You got to tell it.
Oh my God.
I know, like, we're going to talk some heavy topics about him, but, like, this story, I laughed.
Do you want me to say the F word?
Yeah,
too?
I don't care, bro.
All right. Is that going to get you demonetized?
I will just beep it out for YouTube, but it'll play on Spotify.
Okay, I think you should beep it out,
Yeah.
all right? Because I'm going to use trigger warning. I'm going to use a word that will probably offend some of the softer of you people, right? I want to say it was Brian Barbini who said it, too, by the way. It's either Brian King or Brian Barbini, if those dudes are still alive and they're listening to this podcast. So, Ranger parking lots are full of like shitty pickup trucks and race cars and motorcycles and shit, dirt bikes. Just like any Army barracks parking lots. For those of you who served in the military, you know what I'm talking about. For those of you who have not served in the military, it's a bunch of young dudes who suddenly have money, and most of them are country or hood, and they go out and they buy some obnoxious, ridiculous car that they can't afford. So if you look in a parking lot of any unit, especially an infantry unit, you're going to find big ass pickup trucks, broke Jeeps, Subaru WRXs, like scooped out Honda Civics and street bikes, right? Just the most obnoxious collection of vehicles that young men in America can have, right?
It's a great depiction.
All right. So one of the guys in the platoon, he got a brand new vehicle. I don't remember what it was. I think it might have been JP with that, or I think it might have been Ray with that Bronco too. Anyway, one of the guys in the platoon gets a new vehicle, and it's a lifted truck. It's some obnoxious, right? And at the time, we didn't have a cough. At the time, we're in the platoon room, we're in the platoon AO, which is on the second floor. So our second floor looks out above and down into the parking lot. The parking lot is between ACO and CCO. And I'm just saying this for historical reference. If you're from 275 and you were in ACO on the second platoon wing, you look down on the parking lot, and the parking lot was between ACO and CCO. So you guys know. Anyway, one of the guys, we're on second floor, and we're looking in the parking lot, and he's bragging about his new whip. And his new whip is some piece of shit lifted truck, right? And he's bragging about his car. And Tillman, who is older and educated, and let's not lie, he's a millionaire, right? He never flaunted his wealth ever. Never, ever flaunted his wealth ever. But it's well known he's got money because he played in the NFL, right? He's like, we're talking about the car or the guy's truck, and Tillman comes over and he's like, hey, I'm going to buy a car here in a couple days, and I'm going to show you guys what a real man drives, right? And we're like, yeah, what are you going to get? He's like, don't worry about it. It's a surprise. I'm going to show you guys. You guys out here with your shit trucks. Look at these stupid trucks. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to show you what a classy real man drives. You're going to find out. I'm going to teach you something. And we're all like, all right, it's probably going to be something badass, right? Because he's got some money, all right? So up to that point, him and Kevin, they carpooled to work every day because Pat had a little house off post, and him and Pat and his wife Marie and Kevin all lived there together. And Kevin had a white Jetta GLI. It's funny, I was just talking to Kevin about this. I was like, you remember that Jetta? And Kevin was very proud of that Jetta. I always assumed up until recently that Pat bought it for him, but no. Kevin bought a Jetta GLI when he was in California. He drove it up to 275, and that was just their little family car. So every day, the Tillman brothers would ride into work in Kevin's white Jetta. So Tillman's very, very proud. He's like, watch, I'm going to get a real car. I'm going to show you what a real man drives, right? Knowing full well that he's highly educated, he's got money, and he's by far the most alpha human being who's ever lived, right? I'm assuming like he's going to come in some super truck, right? A couple days, can't believe I'm telling this to the public. Brian Barbini, if you're listening, I'm pretty sure it was you that said this. A couple days later, he comes into work, and we're in the second floor, and we're looking in the parking lot, and this car pulls in, and it's a white Volvo station wagon with a cream leather interior. And we're like, whose car is that, dude? Whose mom's whip is that? And the door opens, and Kevin gets out, and I can remember looking at his face, he goes like this, and he walks into the barracks, right? Until he gets out of the car and he does this, he's like, shuts the door, right? Like proud dad, looking like Ned Flanders, right? All right. And we're like, what the is that what Tillman got? Did he get a station wagon or a Volvo station wagon? Are you kidding me? And he comes up the stairs. We hear him come up the stairs, and he comes in the room, and he's beaming. He's got a big smile on his face, hands on his hips. And Barbini goes, yo, Pat got a car. And the room just goes crazy laughing, right? Yo, Pat got a car, right? And Tillman hits the roof. He's like, what? Freaks he's like, that's a great car. He's like, don't talk shit about my car. He's like, you idiots wouldn't know a great car. He's like, you don't have any class. He's like, that is a great car. And he's like, yo, I didn't know you were a lesbian, bro. Like, what kind of car is that? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Just the locker room, bro.
Just roasting him. Got roasted to death about this car. And Pat freaked out. Like, really was not having that shit. He wasn't laughing, like mad at you guys, and stormed out, right?
What'd Kevin say?
Kevin, I don't remember. Kevin, bringing this up to Kevin years later, he thinks it's hilarious because we roasted Pat about this car mercilessly roasted him about this car for a long time afterwards. And Kevin, now looking back on it, I just talked to him before this podcast, and Kevin was laughing. He's like, he loved that car, right? Yeah. So shout outs to Pat Tillman and the Volvo. Come on, man. What were you thinking?
Yeah.
Love that guy, but what were you thinking bringing a Volvo station wagon into Ranger Regiment parking lot, dude. You
Like
know?
you, Pat Tillman was kind of disgusted by like low effort people.
Yeah.
Pat was also disgusted by morons. How did
Yeah.
you guys bond over that?
I don't know if we bonded over it, but like, I just know that my energy was very compatible with like the kind of people that he liked. I was a high energy, intelligent guy who had some fairly well formed opinions about the world. I had lived a little bit of life before I came into regiment. I think the guys that he didn't like, it's not the junior guys who like, if you were like 19 and you were from the country and you were a bumpkin and you didn't know anything about life, but you had a good attitude, he was cool with you. I think the guys he didn't like were like the pretentious dudes that thought they knew everything. I think he had a real problem. His problem wasn't with authority. It was with like know-it-alls. And there's a lot of those in the Army. And I just think he was, to his credit, the only thing he cared about was the character of somebody and whether you could hold an intelligent conversation and challenge him a little bit.
Pat was constantly challenging people. What are you reading? How do you feel about that? Do you have any cool examples that you can remember from stuff like that?
Did I mention the Kafka thing already?
A little bit.
Yeah. Well, he actually had like, I don't want to say a book club, but I remember very clearly he had a list of books he was reading. And he was a big fan of Chomsky, and I had read all the Chomsky Trilateral Commission stuff. And I remember him and me and this guy named Wilson, who also ended up getting RFS, like me and him and Wilson having a real serious conversation about Chomsky, the writings of Chomsky, because like we were all fans of Chomsky, but for different reasons. I just liked the patter and the pace and the way in which Chomsky writes. And I like the fact that he was taking big geopolitical ideas and kind of condensing them in ways that were easy for people to understand. So, yeah, he kind of maintained a list of books that he was reading, and he was very into geopolitical writing. I know that.
Did Pat ever give you any kind of advice that you remember?
No. Our relationship wasn't like some mentor shit. I would definitely say it was peer. It was a peer relationship, but I looked up to him just because he was a unit. You know what I mean? We were in a world of like hyper alpha dudes, and he was the most hyper alpha dude in that world. And he was cool. Like, I've lifted a lot of weights with Pat, and it's kind of funny when you like lift weights with somebody who's, I don't know, literally twice as strong as you. It's kind of a little bit of a humbling experience. I can remember one time. This is a pretty good story about him. We went over to the BFC, the Battalion Fitness Center. It used to be called the BFC back then. Which ironically, it was named after him after he was killed, and they smeared his name in the mud. But we went over to the BFC one night, and he's doing decline bench. And I remember this very clearly. He was like, "Hey, I need you to spot me," and I was laughing, like, "All right, whatever, bro." He's got 120s in his hand, and he's just cranking out reps, decline bench, ding, 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 just nailing 120s. And I look down, and his arm is like up and disgusting. He was huge. Like you're big. You got guns. He was significantly bigger than you. And he was sculpted, like, ripped. But his arm was like terribly deformed. Like the knot of his bicep was almost up in his deltoid. It was disgusting looking. And it was real gnarled, and like he was very vascular, but it looked gross. It looked like a moray eel was coiled up in his arm. And he's lifting. I'm like, "Yo, Tilly, what's wrong with your arm?" And now, mind you, while we have this conversation, the whole time he's knocking out reps. He's like, "Oh yeah, that happened in a game in college." He's like, "I tore the bicep off. I tore my bicep off trying to make an arm tackle." He's still lifting at this time, trying to make an arm tackle in the first quarter. And I just didn't tell anybody about it, and I wanted to finish the game. So I just finished the game, and then after the game was over, then I told the staff, like, "Hey, I think I hurt my arm." And they looked at my arm and they were like, "Oh shit, you tore your bicep off." He's like, and by the time I had surgery on it, it was like kind of too late to really fix this shit. He's like, "My arm works fine now. It just looks weird." And this whole time he's like yakking out 120s like it's nothing. And at the time I was like, "Ugh, that's gross." But now looking back on it, I'm like, man, that's like that's like him in a synopsis. You know what I mean? That's like such a mark of like a different human that won't quit. And like wants excellence. He doesn't give a tearing my arm. My arm is important. Winning this game is important. You know what I mean? Like he really was sacrificing himself for what he believed in.
So you get the opportunity. You leave for Ranger School.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Ranger School. How was that, dude? Everybody always wants to know about, like, you know, the training and.
So, do you want to talk about my experience in Ranger School and how it ties in with the Tillman thing?
Yeah.
All right. So I want to preface this by saying, like, you know, I would say that most of the people listening to this podcast have talked to other Rangers, and they've heard about Ranger School, and Ranger School is pretty well known. I had an extremely unusual event happen to me in Ranger School, and it directly involved the death of my very good friend, Pat Tillman. So, what I'm about to talk about right now isn't a story about Ranger School. Many people have been to Ranger School. I went to Ranger School. I graduated. I got my Ranger tab. But this story is not about Ranger School. Well, it is, but it's more about school and the death of my very good friend, Pat. So I went down to Ranger School and did great, yada, yada, yada. Recycled mountains, right? So when you recycle in Ranger School in the mountain phase, which is the second of the 3 phases, you're kind of put in what's known as a little gulag. So you're in there for a couple weeks and you rest and refit, and you're doing like bullshit like local area beautification details until the next school cycle comes up and you can hop in with another school. Right?
Yeah, and I kind of want to preface the story. You know, the war on terror is like full swing. Ranger Regiment's going. You've already been on one trip. Dudes are punching out. Like, I know you didn't really want to go to Ranger School. You needed it, but like your unit was deploying and like, I know you didn't really want to go. So I think it's important to like preface that, like, you wanted to be at war.
Ranger School was a prerequisite to continue being employed in the Ranger Regiment. If you're in the Ranger Regiment, you will go to Ranger School and you will get your tab. And if you don't, you're gone, right? And the war is in full swing at this time. So I'm in Ranger School. Something happens. I'm recycle mountain phase, and I'm in mountain phase, and I'm out mowing the grass one day. And Zach, I can't remember his last name. He comes. It's a warm day. It's in North Georgia, end of April, coming up on May. Zach comes running up to me. He's like, "Hey, McCoy. I'm pushing a lawnmower when this happened." He's like, "Hey, aren't you friends with Pat Tillman?" I was like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he just goes, "Buddy." I'm like, "What? What's up?" He's like, and he kind of was at a loss for words. And he's like, it's on the news. I think something happened to Pat. I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I was over at the lounge, the NCO lounge, because the NCO lounge was part of the area that we were mowing and shit." He's like, "I was ever at the NCO lounge, and there's like a thing on TV." He's like, "I think Pat's gone." I remember saying, "I think Pat's gone." And I looked at him just the way you looked at me, like that. And I stopped what I was doing, and I ran over to the lounge, and I was looking through the window, and they had TVs on, and there was a CNN with a scroller going on. And they were announcing, like, star NFL athlete Pat Tillman has been killed in Afghanistan. And I went into the NCO lounge, which, of course, I'm strictly forbidden from doing this because I'm not only a student, but I'm a recycle student in Mountain Phase and Ranger School. And I barge in there, and I'm looking at the TV. I'm watching the scroller go by, and this guy comes up, and he's like, hey, you're not supposed to be in here. And I was like, "Yeah, shut. And he looked at me, and he looked at the TV, and I guess he saw the look on my face, and he was like, "Oh, man, hey, come here, really." And his tone changed. He's like, "You can't be in here. You got to get out of here." And he was pushing me out, and as he was pushing me out, I was like watching the TV. And I just remember going from the lounge and going outside and how bright it was. And like thinking about it, like, this is crazy. I haven't thought about his death in a long time. Just thinking about, like, I can remember the heat and the smell of the grass and how bright it was, and thinking, like, because I knew Blessing, but this was a dear friend of mine. This is somebody I cared about, somebody I looked up to, and somebody I loved. Somebody we all loved. He wasn't just my very special friend. He was a part of our family. We loved him. It was impossible to not like this person. He was a very, very special person. And I remember walking outside, and they held a formation. They were like, "All right, everybody form up." And I kind of walked over in like a zombie state. And one of the NCOs came out, and he had a clipboard, like one of those metal contractor clipboards. And he's like, "I got an announcement to make." And he pulled some papers out. And to his credit, he was very somber. And he started reading the announcement of Tillman's death. And there were two guys behind me talking. And I turned around and I kind of like went nuclear. I was like, shut the fuck, shut that fuck, blah, 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 blah. And the guy was like, all right, hey, get it together, you know? And he's like, he read the announcement that was on the paper. As of such and such hours, Pat Tillman has been killed by the Taliban, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, and I know that we have two guys here, because it was me and Mike Anderson. I know we have two guys here who served in Tillman's platoon. And I just remember looking down the formation line and looking at Mike. And Mike just standing there in shock with his mouth open, like. And then having this like wave of like, I don't know how to describe it. This wave of emotion hit me for sure. And I walked right out of formation. I didn't ask. I just walked out of formation. I walked up the hill to the HHC, the headquarters and headquarters company. And I walked in, and the NCO didn't even, I don't know if he didn't follow me or if he called me and I just ignored him, but I walked up to the hill and I asked to see the CO, and I don't really remember how I got there, but I told the CO, I was like, I want a VM right now. Or VW, sorry, voluntarily withdraw. I want a VW right now, get me out of here. Right now, I want to get out of here. I want to get back with my platoon. I want to get overseas. I need to be with my guys right now. I don't care about this school. I don't care about anything that happens here. I'm VMing officially right now. And someone came and got me, and like they gave me a little speech about how I was being emotional. Hey, let's get back with your platoon, yada, 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 yada. And I had a lot of attitude with them. I was very emotional. And then I remember later that day, some guy that I didn't know, some senior NCO, I want to say he was an E8, he came up and he pulled me out of the barracks and he was like, hey, I want to talk to you. And he gave me this really emotional speech. And I think they picked this guy because this guy had lost a close friend in combat as well, right? And this guy, to his credit, was trying to give me like a pep speech. He's like, look, man, I've been exactly where you are. I know what you're going through. And I'm telling you that it's very important that you finish this. You have to stay here. He's like, and he was like, Tillman would want you to stay here. And the second he said that, I tuned him out, right? He's like, but he's like, this is very important that you finish your career. You can't just leave here because this is going to be your career forever, right? Because if you don't get your Ranger tab, you're out of the Ranger Regiment, and now you're just a nobody, right? So to this guy's credit, he was very, very, he was trying to guide me to do the right thing, and I just did not want to hear what the he had to say. Like, cool, that sucks that your buddy died in combat, but you know what? I don't give a about this place. And I remember kind of like not getting in his face, but like being like, look, man, this is theater. This is fake. This is show. We're going to go out in the woods and we're going to pretend to do patrols. We're going to pretend to shoot at each other. My friends are over there and they're getting killed right now. I want to get the out of here right now. What do I got to do to get out of here? What do I got to do to get kicked out? I'll get kicked out of here. I don't care. You know what I mean? If it has to get to the level where I got to get kicked out of here, I'll do that. But I want to VM right now. I want to go on the record saying I'm VMing right now. I was very, very adamant about it. And he got frustrated about it. And of course he would. I would have done the same thing. If I went to talk to some young hua and try to give him some life advice and try and kick some real knowledge to him, especially about losing a friend in combat, and he gave me some attitude like that, yeah, I would have acted the same way. And he was kind of like, all right, man, whatever. I tried, right? But to his credit, he was like, look, dude, like, you don't understand how serious this is. You got to finish being here. You're going to hurt what could be a really promising career. And this sucks, but soldiers die, and you have to get through this, right? I was like, I don't want to hear it. He's like, all right, man, fine. The next day, wake up, walk right up to HHC. When I get there, the company commander happened to be in HHC, and I can't remember the guy's name, but I remember very, very clearly what he looked like. He was a captain about to make major. He had a triple stack like me, and he had walked on some of the patrols, and I remember he was a real hard ass, a real like by the book, rules only, no personality, inhuman officer hard ass. And I walked up there and I found out he was there. And like, you know, we're on recycle, so we didn't have a real schedule. It's not like I was breaking protocol. I just walked up there and I was like, hey, sir, can I get a minute with you? Excuse me, can I get a minute with you? Yeah, Ranger McCoy, come on inside, whatever. I was like, sir. And I tried to do the military decorum thing. Sir, I think you've heard by now, I want a VM, but like, I cannot stress this enough. Please, whatever it takes, I keep saying VM, I want a VW as soon as possible. Whatever it takes, whatever you need me to sign, whatever you need me to say, or even if I have to do something against protocol, but please, I really, really want to get out of here as soon as possible so I can go back and redeploy. Like, I don't know how more firmly I can tell people this. I will do anything to get out of here, not because of school, but I need to be back with my people. I need to be back with my platoon. Because for those of you listening who don't know, an infantry platoon, that's your family. You know what I mean? As dysfunctional as it is, your platoon's your family. I didn't even care about the company. I didn't care about the battalion. I wanted to be with my platoon. So, and he sat me down and he, to his credit, he gave me a pretty good little speech. And he told me something. He's like, look, man, he's like, I've walked with you on patrols. I've seen how you conduct yourself out there. He's like, you're a good ranger. And he's like, I'm telling you something. He's like, if I had a whole company of guys like you, I'd have the best of you in the Army. He's like, he really buoyed up my confidence. He's like, but I'm not going to let you VM. Or I'm not going to let you VW. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. I know this sucks and I know this is hard for you, but like, this is my decision. I think you're a good ranger. And he's like, I'm not going to let you torpedo your career by VW. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. So like, you're going to have to deal with this. I'm sorry. And he was cool about it, but he was very firm, but he was looking back on it. He was cool with it. He made the right decision. He knew that I was emotional. He knew that I was upset. And he's like, you know what? He's like, I've seen how you are. I've seen you walk out there. I've graded your patrols. I know you're a good hua. I am making the decision. I'm not going to let you f up your career because you're upset about the death of your friend, even though that's a very normal thing to be emotional about. Basically, this is how it is. Sucks to suck. Get back with your people, right? And that was it. He just put the clamp on it. You are not VWing while I'm here. I'm sorry. Sorry about your friend, but this is soldiering, bro. You know what I mean? And I get the feeling he's probably lost somebody too, because the GWAT was in very full swing at this point, right? Fine, whatever. Back to my platoon. Recycle ends. We're out working we're out patrolling again. And one day, I'm out digging, and we're digging in the daytime. And my ranger buddy, who I want to say it was Derek Otker, but I can't remember. It wasn't Derek Otker. It was a guy named Derek. I can't remember the guy's name. We're digging in the middle of the day. We're in a field, middle of the daytime. We're digging in. I'm with Derek. And I get called off to some detail somewhere. So I trot off and I go off and I go, maybe it was a water resupply. I don't know what it was, but I went off with the rest of the platoon, with the rest of the guys. Then I come back to finish my digging in. It's a little darker. And Derek is like, hey, man, the RIs were over here talking about you. I was like, what? He was like, yeah, they were asking me and some of the other guys, like, yo, what's up with McCoy? And I'm all hostile. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, no, it's cool, man. It's cool, man. We all said the same thing. We're like, look, dude, his good friend was killed. And he really doesn't want to be here. And he wants to get back with his people. And like, he's a good dude and we got his back. But like, I think we all think it's understandable why he's acting the way that he is and why his attitude is like, not good right now. He's upset. He's upset about the death of his friend. And they all said that. All the other bat boys. They asked all the bat boys, like, what's up with this guy? And all the bat boys, they all said the same thing. So I guess the RIs were like, all right, check, Roger, whatever. So mountain phase ends. We go to Florida. And this is where things get weird. We're in Florida. We're walking one day. It's very early in the phase. I'm walking, middle of the daytime. And I'm walking point. And I'm with an RI I've never heard of and never met before. Florida phase. Mountain phase is behind me now. I got the map case. For those of you who don't know, the map case is probably about, 16 by 16-ish. Mm-hmm. It's It's got clear Lexan on one side and Gore-Tex on the other. Got your map folded up in there. I'm walking, and I got the map case in my hand. And we stop, middle of the daytime. So RI's like, hey, where are you at? Sergeant, I'm right here. Nah. Tell me where the you're at. Where the beep you're at. All right, we're going to play this game. We're going to play this little Ranger School theater game. Cool, man. I'm right here. Tell me why you know where you are. All right, man. This is how I know where I am, because I'm triangulating. I'm pulling a back azimuth from here, and I'm terrain associating. We are right here, and my last pace count was here. My last azimuth was here. My next azimuth is there. My back azimuth is here, and I'm on triangulation. I know where I'm at, dude. I know where I'm at, and I'm on a knee. And the tone is starting to get a little hostile, right? And he said something to me, and he's like, don't you talk to me like that. And I stood up, and I freaked out. I stood up, and I slammed the map on. I was like, I know where the fuck I am. And I got in his face. I jumped up, threw the map on the ground. I know where the fuck I am. Lost it. Had a total loss of military protocol. A complete 100 loss of military protocol. And I don't know if you know, or the listeners out there know, but that is the unforgivable sin at Ranger School. Getting in an RI's face, you're gone. You're lucky he doesn't have two other RIs come over and beat the fuck out of you, then throw you out. That is the execution unforgivable sin, to get in an RI's face. I just had a complete loss of, and like, I think maybe deep down inside I knew finally this is it. I'm going to get out. They're not going to let me VW. I'm going to get out here on my own terms. I know where the fuck I am. Nose to nose with this guy. And he grabbed me and he judo chucked me. He's, don't you ever get in my, you're gone. You're done. You're done. Get the my training field. And he was pushing me, right? So I'm fine. I'm out of here. I don't care. I'm walking back to the barracks. He's pushing me. He's like, you're done. Really, really explosive, right? And like that's especially in a very tough indoc school like Ranger School. Anything like that happens, like, I'm lucky I didn't get an Article 15 for that shit, right? It's serious loss of control, very serious breach of protocol, and 100% a deeply unforgivable sin in Ranger School. It's probably better to negligently discharge than that's just an executable crime that you can't come back from in Ranger School. That is it. Over with. You're getting out of here. So I walk all the way back to the training area. I walk all the way back to the barracks from the training area. It's a long walk. I don't know how far it is. It's got to be a mile. At least a kilometer. I get back. And I have all my shit with me. I got my ruck, all my stuff. And I remember I got mud on me. I can feel the mud. I'm sitting on my ruck in front of the barracks. And it's the golden hour. You know, the golden hour where the sun comes down. It's that perfect glow. And I'm sitting there, and I can hear mud dripping off of me onto the stones. Pip, pip, pip. And I finally had the moment of clarity where it dawned on me, like, holy shit, like, it's over with. Like, this is it. This is the end of my Ranger career. All those dreams I had as a kid, all the work I put into this, all those years I spent, all that time with First Sergeant Brown, all those miles on the road, like the time with Pat, everything, it's all going to come to an end right here. You know what I mean? This is it. This is the end of me being a Ranger. They're going to fly me back to Afghanistan. I'm probably going to be there a month. And then at the end of that month, I'm going to take my scroll off, and I'm never going to be a Ranger again. I'll never have got my tab, and that's going to be the end of it. And the gravity of this kind of all just hit me at once. Like, fuck, like this dream that has been set in motion since I was a child is coming to an end. And the weight of it just started to hit me. And I didn't break down, but I was just, the crushing realization of what was happening. Like, you wanted this, you got it. And I'm sitting there contemplating the tragedy of the universe, and this guy comes walking over. And I can see his face right now. I don't know his name, but he's tall and thin. He's got a pinched, narrow, deeply suntan face. Tall, long, gangly guy, and he's got a brand new, super bright green Alice Large ruck on. And you can tell that his ruck has like a whoopee and a pillow in it, right? Because you know the difference between the way a loaded ruck and a poofy filled ruck looks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. He's got a brand new ruck on. He comes sauntering over, and the closer he gets, I see he's a colonel. And I see him. I'm like, oh shit! And I go to jump up. He's like, don't get up, don't get up. He's like, are you McCoy? Yes, sir. He's like, hey, grab your shit, start walking with me. I was like, yeah, Roger, sir. So I put my ruck on, got my shit. I still have my rifle with me. I have all my shit. And he's walking, and I'm walking in the protocol position, which is to his right, 2 paces back behind him. We're walking. And we just start walking, and I'm like, all right, this guy's going to walk me down to the trucks, or he's going to walk me to somewhere else in camp, and I'm going to fill out some papers, and that's going to be the end of it. He's going to give me the speech like, hey, this is the end of your Ranger career. Some protocol shit, right? But as we walk past the buildings, and then we keep walking out into the woods, and we're walking for a long time. And I don't say a word to this guy because he's a colonel, right? I'm like an untabbed specialist at this point. I'm an untabbed specialist who like just got in a fight with an RI and said, "F you in this place," and has tried to VW like 5 times on record, right? So I don't say a word to this guy, and we're walking for a long time. And then out of nowhere, he kind of like starts chit-chat conversation with me. He's like, where are you from, man? I was like, oh, I'm from Baltimore, sir. He's like, oh, Baltimore. Yeah. You got them crabs down there. Yeah, Roger, you like crab cakes? Just chit-chatting with him about nothing. Oh, you know, I got a cousin who used to live in Baltimore, and you like the Orioles. They got that nice stadium there. We're just chit-chatting about nothing, right? And his vibe is like really nice and warm. So I'm feeling a little bit better about what's going on. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm still getting kicked out of here, but at least this guy's not a prick about it, right? We're walking, and we get deeper and deeper and deeper into the bush, and I'm aware that we're not walking towards the trucks. And we come to this big clearing, this huge clearing of like a grassy field where the grass was a good knee to mid-thigh high, right? And we take a knee, and he's looking out over this clearing. He's like, how do you think we should cross this clearing? I was like, well, sir, you know, we should shoot a back azimuth and then do a box cut. And then once we've got the cut over and confirm and shoot azimuth so we're on target, right? He's like, that's a good answer. He's like, that's how you should cross it. He's like, nah, we're just going to run across this thing. It's like, all right. And he looked at me, and he did this thing I remember so well. He smiled, and he patted me on the shoulder. He's like, you ready? I was like, yeah, Roger, sir. And he took off, and he's like, let's double time. So we started jogging, and this field had to have been a couple 100 meters across. We're jogging, and he's jogging a little ahead, then I jog a little ahead, then he's jogging a little ahead, and I jog a little ahead. And he starts laughing, and then after a while, we're both running as hard as we can, and we're just 2 guys out for a run, right? And we come to the other end, the wooded end, and we're like, you know, he's kind of laughing, and we're breathing real hard, and he claps me on the back, and he goes, hey, you see those guys over there? Yes, sir. He's like, that's your platoon. Fall in with them and don't say anything. And he just turned around and left. And I just kind of stood there, and I kind of crept over, and there was a new RI. It was like, and I just found my platoon. I found my squad, and I just dug my hole, and I got in, and then I was back in Ranger School. No one ever said a single word about it ever again. And like, my boys were like, oh, you're back. We thought you were gone. And that was it. We're just back in Ranger School again. And I was very vexed about this incident. And Ranger School is so difficult, I kind of immediately thought about it. And then the aftermath of Tillman's death and all this stuff, it was like something that got shelved in my memory for a long time. And then, excuse me, years later, I went on a training thing out on the West Coast with a guy who had been an RI. And we had a couple of drinks around a campfire, and I told him this story. It was the first time I ever told him this story. And I was like, why do you think that they didn't kick me out of school? And I was like, I've been trying to think about this for a long time. Why the fuck didn't I get kicked out of Ranger School? And he's like, I know exactly why you didn't get kicked out of Ranger School. I can't remember the guy's name, but he had been an RI for like 4 or 5 years, long time. He's like, I know exactly why you didn't get kicked out of Ranger School. He's like, Because that place is ran by the NCOs. The NCOs down there run that school, and the officers make their decisions based off of the suggestions of the NCOs that run that school and walk the grounds. He's like, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. He goes, your dear friend was killed. And your first thought was to go be with your family, to go be with your platoon family. Your first thought immediately, the second you got the news, was to walk up there and say, I need to leave here and go be with my people. Your first thought was the way a fighting man thinks. You weren't thinking about being a Ranger school student. You were thinking the way a soldier thinks. And he says that the soldiering spirit is very difficult to find and nurture in people. And for all the bullshit that goes on in Ranger School, that is a school that is meant to build real soldiers. Real soldiers go there, right? All the politics, all the gender, all that stuff. Like, that is a school for soldiers. And he's like, and your intentions were very pure. So what happened is that word got around. The NCOs, obviously, it was the biggest news that happened, right? Tillman was killed. This guy wants to quit, blah, 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 blah. And you went to that young captain and you told him exactly what was on your mind. And that captain, guarantee you, that captain and those NCOs, they made a call up to Florida. And they were like, hey, keep an eye on this guy. He's gonna try and quit again. And you're not going to let him quit. And that young captain probably told the CO of the next company that you were heading to what the deal was. He's be like, hey, John, this is Rick down in Dahlonega. This kid's going to try and VW. Don't let him VW. I will not let this VW. And that word somehow got up to the colonel. So when you got kicked off the training ground, which you should have, which under other circumstances your ass would have been Art 15 and thrown the out of there, that word clearly, when you got thrown off, that word went up to the colonel. The colonel heard about that, right? Hey, we had a student get out of pocket on one of our eyes. Instant death sentence, right? But what happened was that colonel realized, and these other guys realized, like, hey, that's that dude who's been trying to leave because his friend was killed and he wants to get back in the war. And he goes, that colonel had to make sure that his RIs didn't lose face. So that colonel held you there until the RI shift changed, right? Because if he had put you back in with that same RI, that would have made that RI lose face, right? So you got to let it blow over until another cycle, because I think they work 2 ons, 2 offs. You got to let it blow over until that guy's done. Then he personally brought you out there so the next RI knows, hey, this guy's back in rotation, without even having to say anything. If I walk into the platoon with the battalion commander and the battalion commander says, go over there and start working, then the RI knows, like, all right, this guy's back in rotation. He's like, and he goes, that's why that's the best school that's ever existed in this military. He's like, because that school's intentions are real. You know what I mean? Everything is permeated by politics. Everything is permeated by the logistical of the military. He's like, but that's why that place is real. And he's like, your intentions and like the things you were trying to do were coming from a soldierly, altruistic, real place. And people like you don't come along that often. That's why they looked out for you. So
I know that was a deep dive, man. I really appreciate that story. Like, it's a very unique look and perspective at humanity that a lot of people don't get to get from a warrior, somebody kind of like you.
I think that young captain, and I think that colonel, and I think that NCO down at, I think that captain and that NCO in Mountain Phase and that colonel down in Florida, they were cut from a good stock, and they knew to take care of somebody who needed it.
The story about Pat and kind of how he got killed, I mean, I don't think that's something we need to dive into. There's plenty of that all over the internet. I do kind of want to talk a little bit about, the weapon, because I think that's a story that's close to you. Is there anything that do you want to say about that?